The first person to knock on Owen Mercer's cabin door carried a photograph of his dead mother, laughing. He knew Beth by the tilt of her head. The picture was sun-faded, its corners rounded from years of handling, but there was no mistaking the narrow face or the dark hair she used to cut with kitchen scissors. She stood among 8 other adults outside the cabin, holding one end of a long wooden table. His grandfather held the other. Both looked 20 years younger and happier than Owen could remember either of them being. Behind them, painted across the cabin's blue door, were 5 white words. "Leave the room ready." Owen looked past the photograph, at the actual door hanging crooked behind him. Its paint had weathered to gray. No words remained. The woman on the step watched his face. She was close to 70, with silver hair escaping a plastic clip and a diner uniform showing beneath her wool coat. "Walter, keep it going?" she asked. "Keep what going?" Her eyes moved over the smoky room, the army cot, and the 2 grocery bags containing nearly everything Owen owned. "Oh," she said softly, "I see." 6 hours earlier, Owen's cousin Mason had dropped him at the bottom of the trail and declined to put the truck in park. The rain had thinned to a mist, although every branch above them seemed determined to save a cold drop for the back of Owen's neck. His belongings were stacked in the truck bed beneath a blue tarp. 2 garbage bags of clothes, a dented toolbox, his grandfather's cot, and a cardboard box Mason had labeled kitchen stuff, as if Owen might confuse it with his collection of French porcelain. There were 3 plates in it, none matched. "You sure this thing's still passable?" Mason asked, squinting up the muddy trail. "Passable to what?" "People. You drove a 4-wheeler up here last fall." "Yeah, a 4-wheeler, not a person carrying half a house." Owen lifted the tarp and pulled out the toolbox. "You volunteering?" Mason laughed through his nose. He did that when he wanted it understood that something was beneath the dignity of a full laugh. At 32, he had their grandfather's height and their Aunt Diane's talent for making concerns sound like an accusation. "I would," he said, "but Mom's got me meeting the furnace guy." "Of course, the farmhouse system is ancient." So was Grandpa. Mason's mouth tightened. For one satisfying second, Owen thought he might finally say something honest. Maybe that the house felt strange without Walter knocking his cane against the baseboards, or that it had been indecent to bring a furnace contractor through the kitchen the morning after the will was read. Instead, he glanced at his phone. "You've got a roof anyway." Owen looked uphill. Through the trees, the cabin appeared in pieces. One wall the color of dirty teeth, a patch of tin roof, the black square of a window. So do abandoned gas stations. "See? You're joking. That's healthy." Mason began handing things down. He did help with that much. He even kept one palm under the cardboard box when its damp bottom sagged. Owen had been given 48 hours to clear his things from the farmhouse, not because anyone needed his old bedroom, but because Diane said clean breaks were kinder. The room had once been a sewing room. For the last 3 years it had held a twin mattress, a lamp with no shade, and the plastic drawer unit where Owen kept Walter's appointment schedules, insurance letters, medication lists, and the receipts Walter insisted nobody needed until the exact morning he needed one. Those papers were still in the drawer when Diane told Owen to take only what belonged to him. He had left them. At the attorney's office, Diane received the farmhouse and most of the land. Mason and his younger brother, Curtis, received Walter's trucks, equipment, and the workshop contents. There were small cash gifts to 3 relatives who had sent Christmas cards. Owen received the cabin and the wooded slope immediately surrounding it. Diane had pressed a tissue to the corner of one eye. "Well," she said, "Dad knew you always liked simple." Owen had never once told anyone he liked simple. What he liked was rent he could pay. Mason dragged the folded army cot to the trail and leaned it against a tree. "You want me to come back before dark?" The offer surprised Owen enough that he looked at him. Mason shrugged. "In case there's a bear. In case I need somebody slower than me." "There he is." Mason pointed at him, pleased. "That's the Owen I remember." The Owen he remembered was apparently a man who could be identified by insulting him. "I'm good," Owen said. "All right, Mom said dinner's at 6 if you want to come down. Thought she wanted a clean break. She doesn't want you starving. That'd look bad." Mason put his hands into his jacket pockets. He stayed there a moment longer than necessary, looking up the trail, but not quite at Owen. Then he said, "Grandpa could have sold this patch years ago." Owen waited, just saying. He must have had a reason for keeping it. There it was, a glint of mystery, offered like compensation. Owen had seen the same glint in himself when the attorney said, one-room cabin. It had lasted until Diane explained that the roof leaked, the pump froze every winter, and the county had stopped maintaining the access road before Owen was born. Maybe he forgot it was here, Owen said. Mason's truck disappeared with a red wink of taillights. Owen stood beside his belongings, listening to the engine fade and the rain gather in the trees. He made 4 trips. By the second, mud had soaked through his boots. By the third, one handle had torn off a garbage bag. By the fourth, he was dragging the cot behind him and telling Walter, aloud, exactly what he thought of his generosity. The cabin door had swollen in its frame. Owen drove his shoulder into it and stumbled inside with the cot, hitting one knee against the cold wood stove. "Perfect," he said to the empty room. "Love what you've done with the place." The room was 12 feet by 16, not counting the corner claimed by the stove. One window faced the trees. A narrow counter ran along the back wall beneath open shelves. Mouse droppings dotted the floor, and an old wasp nest hung from a roof beam like a gray paper heart. Owen set his grocery bags on the counter. The counter tilted. An apple rolled out, crossed the boards, and bumped against his boot. He picked it up and ate it, standing there. Walter had brought him to the cabin twice. The first time, Owen had been 19 and angry about something he no longer remembered. Walter wanted help replacing a section of stovepipe. They worked 3 hours without discussing the thing Owen was angry about, which was Walter's preferred form of comfort. The second time had been the previous spring. Walter sat on a stump while Owen cleared brush away from the foundation. "You ought to keep this path open," Walter had said. "For who?" Walter had rubbed his palms over the head of his cane. "Somebody always comes." Owen had assumed he meant deer hunters. Now he unfolded the cot and inspected the stove. The stovepipe joint had separated near the wall. He found wire in his toolbox, reseated the pipe, and bound it well enough to test. The wood stacked beneath the eaves was damp outside but dry in the center. He split kindling with Walter's hatchet, crumpled one of the grocery bags under it, and struck 3 matches before the flame held. Smoke entered the room anyway. Owen opened the window, then discovered it would not close. He wedged it with a folded dish towel. The smoke thinned, the rain strengthened. Somewhere inside the wall, a small animal scratched with purposeful little feet. At 5:40, his phone buzzed. "Diane. Supper is ready. Meatloaf." A second message came before he could answer. "Diane. You are welcome, but please wipe your boots. Carpets were just cleaned." He could picture her waiting in Walter's kitchen, her kitchen now, with the good serving bowl placed in the center of the table. The furnace contractor would have left boot marks. Mason would be explaining why those did not count. Owen typed, "Thanks, I'm settled in." He erased settled and wrote, "I ate already." That was not true unless an apple had recently been promoted. Diane answered with a thumbs up. Somehow, it was worse than silence. He found a can of soup in the kitchen box. The label had peeled halfway off, so dinner was either chicken noodle or cream of mushroom. He held the can near his ear and shook it, as though this might settle the matter. That was when someone knocked, not the casual tap of a cousin sent uphill with leftovers. 3 hard knocks, a pause, then 2 more. Owen lifted the iron poker from beside the stove. He had no idea what he would do with it. Asked the visitor to hold still while he selected a good swinging angle, perhaps. The woman on the step did not look alarmed by the poker. She looked past it. Walter? No. Her gaze rose to Owen's face. The mistake seemed to embarrass her. Lord? Of course not. You're Beth's boy. The phrase struck him harder than his name would have. I'm Owen, I know. She took the photograph from her purse. I'm Lucille Harper. Then he was looking at Beth's laughter, at the table, at Walter's hands gripping the opposite end. The fire popped behind him. Smoke curled along the ceiling. Where did you get this? Owen asked. I was there. He found her in the group after she said it. She stood 2 people away from Beth, much younger, but already wearing her mouth in the same skeptical line. What year? 98. Maybe early 99. It was warm, so 98. Lucille rubbed her thumb along one rounded corner. I kept meaning to bring it back. Walter said not to mail it because he didn't trust the post office with anything they couldn't replace. That sounds like him? Is he gone? You saw the obituary. I saw a name and an age. Sometimes newspapers get ahead of themselves. He's gone. Lucille nodded once. She did not offer the soft, automatic apology people had been giving Owen all week. Instead, she looked toward the trees as if Walter might be standing among them, pleased to have escaped before she arrived. "When was the funeral?" she asked. "Yesterday. I was working. At the diner?" She looked down at her uniform. "No." "Undercover for the Treasury Department." Owen almost smiled. Almost. "Why was my mother here?" Lucille's expression changed, not into pity but caution. That made him distrust her more. "She spent a lot of time here." "Why?" "Because there was work." "My mother didn't work." The answer came too fast. It sounded like Diane. Lucille raised her eyebrows. "Beth did all kinds of work. Keeping it was the trouble." Rain tapped against the photograph. She tucked it beneath her coat, and Owen realized they had been standing with the door open while the fire tried to heat the entire ridge. "You should come in," he said, because Walter had raised him to offer shelter before deciding whether he liked someone. Lucille stepped across the threshold and stopped. There was nowhere polite to direct her. The cot was covered with clothes. The only chair had one short leg. Owen moved the clothes and immediately felt foolish, because giving her the cot made the room look even more like what it was. She examined the shelves, the counter, and the wasp nest. "You've let it go," she said. "I inherited it at 10 this morning." "Oh." She glanced at him. "Then Walter let it go." "That he did." Lucille walked to the back wall and touched a bare rectangle in the dust where something had once hung. Her fingers remained there a moment. "What was this place?" Owen asked. She turned, still holding the photograph under her coat. "A room," she said. "I got that far. A room people left better than they found it." Outside, thunder moved low across the hills. Lucille listened to it, then looked at the cot. Owen noticed the plastic grocery sack in her other hand. A toothbrush showed through the thin white bag. So did a folded diner apron and the orange cap of a prescription bottle. She had not driven up a ruined trail in the rain, merely to return a photograph. "How long were you planning to stay?" he asked. Lucille met his eyes without pretending not to understand. "One night," she said. "If Walter's promise still counts." Owen lowered the poker. "What promise?" Lucille glanced at the cot again. "The kind that usually comes with a mattress. That's not an answer. It's the answer I've got tonight." Rainwater shone on her coat sleeves. Owen could smell wet wool, fryer oil, and the smoke collecting above them. He looked at the grocery sack. It was not packed for an overnight visit so much as an evacuation. "One night," he said. Her shoulders loosened, though only slightly. "One night? You take the cot. I'm not putting you on your own floor. It's my floor. Then you should know better than anybody how filthy it is." She bent and began untying her shoes. Owen set the poker down. "I'm 25. Congratulations. I can survive one night on a floor." Walter had a second cot. Walter had a lot of things this morning. Lucille looked at him sharply, hearing more than he intended. She removed her shoes and placed them neatly beside the stove. "Something happened with the will?" "I got the cabin. You said inherited. I figured that part. My aunt got the house, my cousins got the workshop and trucks. And you got this. And the privilege of explaining it to strangers. I didn't ask you to explain." "No? You asked to sleep here." Lucille folded her coat over the short-legged chair. Without it, she appeared smaller but not frail. Her diner dress was navy blue, with a white collar that had gone soft from washing. A paper name tag clung above one pocket. Lucille was written in blue marker, the final L running downhill. She looked around until she found a flat piece of wood near the stove, then slid it beneath the chair's short leg. The chair steadied. "That was driving me crazy," she said. "You've been here 4 minutes. Long 4 minutes." Owen went to the counter and reached for the unlabeled can. "You eat cream of mushroom soup?" "Not willingly. Could be chicken noodle. Can't you tell by shaking?" "I tried." Lucille held out her hand. He gave her the can. She shook it beside her ear, frowned thoughtfully, and announced, "Peaches." "It is not peaches." "No, but you looked hopeful." She reached into her grocery sack and removed a wrapped diner sandwich, 2 small bags of potato chips, and a slice of pie in a plastic container. "I was going to eat in the car," she said. "We can split this." "What kind of sandwich?" "Turkey." "What kind of pie?" "Apple." "What kind of chips?" "Free." He took down the 3 mismatched plates. Lucille set the photograph on the counter while she unwrapped the food. Beth's face was turned upward in laughter, careless and sunlit. Owen placed a plate over that end of the photograph without meaning to. Lucille noticed but said nothing. The sandwich had gone cold, yet it tasted better than anything Diane might have put on Walter's table that night. Lucille divided it exactly in half, then gave Owen the piece with more turkey while pretending not to inspect them. She ate with her elbows close to her sides and saved the pie crust until last. The rain drummed harder. Water began tapping into a metal basin near the back wall. "That leak was here in '98, Lucille said. "That's comforting." Walter claimed it only leaked when it rained. He loved a complete explanation. She smiled down at her plate. Owen wanted to ask about Beth again, but the photograph had changed the room. It was easier to question Lucille while she stood outside as a stranger. Now she had taken off her shoes and shared half a sandwich with him. Any answer would have to remain in the cabin after she gave it. He picked up the empty plates. "Pump work? It's fussy. You remember the pump? I remember everything that made me mad." The hand pump stood 20 yards behind the cabin, beneath a slanted roof of corrugated metal. Owen carried an old enamel pot through the rain, while Lucille watched from the doorway. He worked the handle. It groaned but produced nothing. "You have to prime it," she called. "With what water?" "There used to be a jar under the counter. There used to be electricity at the farmhouse, too, under the far end. Loose board." He returned and crouched beside the counter. One floorboard lifted when he worked a screwdriver beneath it. In the shallow space below sat a cloudy glass jar filled with water and sealed with a rusted lid. Owen held it up. "How old is this?" "Old enough not to drink." That was my next question. He poured it into the pump, worked the handle, and after several hollow coughs, brown water sputtered from the spout. It cleared slowly. The simple success warmed him more than it should have. Lucille came outside with a kettle. Together they filled it and the enamel pot. She checked the water with her fingers, as though the cold might have changed since she last lived there. Back inside, Owen heated enough to wash the plates. Lucille found a dish towel hanging from a nail, took one look at it, and used paper napkins instead. "You lived here?" he asked. 5 weeks. "You said Walter promised you one night. He promised anybody who left right. What does that mean?" "It means they were welcome back for one night. No questions until morning. You're answering questions now." "I'm being polite. That explains why I didn't recognize it." Lucille dried the last plate and placed it on the shelf. "There were rules, nothing fancy. You could stay if the room was empty. You helped with meals, kept the stove going, and did something useful before you left." "For Walter?" "For the room." Owen looked around. Everybody must have left in a hurry. "I built those shelves." The shelves sagged visibly in the middle. "You want me to congratulate you?" "I want you to quit looking at them like that. They held up fine when Walter didn't stack engine parts on them." "What engine parts?" "Gone now?" Owen touched the dusty rectangle on the wall. "What hung here?" Lucille's voice lost its teasing edge. "A board with names." "Whose?" "People who stayed." "My mother's?" "Beth didn't stay." "Not like us." "That's convenient." "It's the truth." "You keep giving me the edge of it." Lucille placed both hands on the counter. "Because it's your first night in a room you didn't want, and your grandfather has been dead barely long enough for the ground to settle. You don't need me sorting your mother into good piles and bad piles before breakfast. My family already sorted her, I know." The certainty in those 2 words irritated him. "You don't know my family. I knew Walter. That's not the same thing." "No," she said, "it is not." She lifted the plate covering the photograph and moved it aside. Beth reappeared. Owen stared at the long wooden table in the picture. Its surface was uneven, made of boards in several widths. One leg looked lighter than the others. The adults behind it were dressed as if they had been interrupted in the middle of work. A man wore coveralls with one strap hanging loose. Lucille had a bandana tied over her hair. Walter's shirt was open at the throat, and Beth had paint across one cheek. What happened to the table? Walter took it apart after he closed the room. Why did he close it? Lucille picked up her coat. "Morning question," she said. "You're not leaving, going to the privy." "There's a privy?" "There was." Owen watched her pull on her shoes. "That doesn't sound promising." It leaned left, even when it was new. She returned 3 minutes later, with rain beaded on her hair and a grim expression. "Well?" he asked. "It has achieved collapse. Does that mean we're digging one tomorrow?" "One night, remember?" "Right." They arranged the sleeping space with more negotiation than diplomacy. Lucille insisted on taking the floor until Owen pointed out that she had to work in the morning, and he currently had nowhere to be. She objected to that wording, which was precisely why he had chosen it. In the end, she took the cot while Owen spread his coat and 2 blankets near the stove. Lucille lay down fully dressed except for her shoes. Owen turned off his phone to save the battery, and the room shrank to the orange glow behind the stove's mica window. For a while, neither spoke. Wind pushed rain against the glass. The patched stovepipe ticked as it heated. Owen could hear Lucille shifting on the canvas cot, trying to find a position that did not squeak. "Your Aunt Diane still live down at the house?" she asked. "You do know my family. I met Diane, long time ago. You like her?" I didn't know liking people was a requirement for remembering them. What did she think of this place? She thought her father was letting strangers take advantage of him. That sounds current. She wasn't always wrong. Owen turned onto his back. A ceiling beam disappeared into darkness above him. Did my mother take advantage of him? Lucille's cot creaked. "Sometimes," she said. The answer hurt more for not being defensive. And other times she was the reason this worked. Owen waited for her to explain. She did not. He remembered Beth appearing at Walter's farmhouse one November night with a split lip and a red suitcase. Owen had been 7. She stayed 4 days, slept until noon, and made pancakes at midnight. On the 5th morning, the suitcase was gone. So were Walter's emergency 20s from the coffee tin. For years, that missing money had been the story Diane told whenever anyone said Beth's name. "Why didn't Grandpa ever tell me?" Owen asked. Maybe he didn't know how. He could explain carburetors for 2 hours. Machines don't argue with the version of you that survives them. Owen looked toward the cot. Lucille's face was only a pale shape. "That sounds practiced. Most true things do, once you've had to repeat them." The scratching began again inside the wall. Lucille sat upright. "What is that?" "Mouse." "That is not a mouse." "Rat?" "Don't upgrade it." "It's probably a squirrel." "At night?" "Could have insomnia." Lucille lowered herself reluctantly. "If it touches me, the one-night promise becomes ownership." Owen laughed before he could stop himself. The sound startled him. It was the first laugh that had not felt disloyal since Walter died. In the morning, the rain had ended. Thin sunlight entered through the window, showing every speck of dust in the air. The cot was empty. For one panicked moment, Owen thought Lucille had gone, taking the photograph and all her unfinished answers. Then he heard the pump handle groaning outside. She returned with the enamel pot and a stack of split wood balanced against her hip. "You don't have to do that," he said. "Room rule." "I didn't agree to any rules. You agreed to the promise. Rules come attached." She set down the wood and looked at the cold stove. "You let the fire die." "I was asleep." Fire has never accepted that excuse. A truck engine sounded below the cabin. Owen recognized the strained climb before Mason's silver pickup appeared between the trees. Mason parked beside the trail and emerged carrying a covered casserole dish. "Mom sent breakfast," he called, "said you pretend you weren't hungry." He reached the porch, saw Lucille, and stopped. Lucille's diner uniform was wrinkled from sleeping in it. Owen's blanket remained on the floor. The old photograph lay face up on the counter between them. Mason looked from one to the other. "Owen," he said carefully, "who is this?" Lucille answered before Owen could. "Somebody your grandfather promised a bed." Mason's eyes dropped to the photograph. Recognition moved across his face, quick and unmistakable. Then he looked at Owen. "Where did she get that?" he asked. It was not curiosity in his voice. It was fear. Mason set the casserole dish on the porch rail, as if he needed both hands available. "Where did she get that?" "It belongs to her," Owen said. I asked where. Lucille picked up the photograph before he could touch it. "Out of my purse. Anything else you'd like inventoried?" Mason ignored her. "Did Grandpa have another copy?" "How would I know? You lived with him. So did you, for 18 years. That was different." "Sure was." Mason glanced back toward his truck. He looked ready to leave and equally determined not to go until the photograph was out of sight. Lucille studied him. "You're Diane's older one. My name is Mason. I heard. Have we met?" "Not in any way that would help either of us." He looked at the photograph again. "Mom said all that ended a long time ago." "All what?" Owen asked. Mason pressed his lips together. The fear Owen had heard was already being packed away. covered by the competent expression Mason used when a delivery was late or an appliance cost more than expected. Grandpa used to let people stay up here, Mason said. People he met through the mill, church, wherever. Mom didn't like it. Why? Because some of them were strangers. They generally start that way, Lucille said. Mason's jaw shifted. There were problems. I don't remember you being here for them. I heard about them. From Diane, from family. Lucille folded the photograph inside a clean paper napkin and returned it to her purse. Those aren't always the same thing. Mason turned to Owen. You might want to be careful. With her? With reopening things you don't understand. I didn't reopen anything. She knocked. And you let her sleep here? There was a storm. There was rain. Aggressive rain. Mason did not smile. This isn't a campground, Owen. The trail comes through Mom's property and ends at mine. We're not doing this. You came up here to bring you breakfast, then bring it. For a second, Mason looked as if he might take the casserole home. Instead, he lifted it from the rail and pushed it into Owen's hands. Eggs and sausage. Dish goes back. Thank you. Mom made it. Thank Mom. I'm telling you now, she's going to have feelings about this. Mom generally does, Lucille said. Mason stared at her. You don't know her. I know that sentence runs in the family. He walked back toward his truck, then turned before reaching it. Grandpa shut this place for a reason. Did he tell you the reason? Owen asked. No. Then we don't understand the same amount. Mason climbed into the truck and reversed too quickly, spraying mud against the brush. Lucille watched until he disappeared. He used to be sweet, she said. You do know him. I saw him around. That's not knowing. What was he afraid of? Your questions, likely. He recognized the picture. So did you. He's seen it before. Lucille did not answer. Owen carried the casserole inside and lifted the foil. The smell of sausage and black pepper filled the room. Diane had cut biscuits into quarters and arranged them around the edges, which meant she had not simply sent leftovers. She had made something designed to travel. Owen hated that this mattered. Lucille checked the small clock pinned to her uniform. I have to get to work. How far? 18 miles. Your car make it up the trail? My car has good sense. It's beside the county road. You walked up here last night? I wasn't going to leave it in Diane Mercer's yard. She wouldn't have done anything. I didn't say she would. I said I wasn't doing it. Owen spooned casserole onto 2 plates. Eat first. I'll be late. You already shared your dinner. That wasn't a contract. Room rule. Lucille gave him a suspicious look. You said you didn't agree to those. I'm revising policy. She remained standing while she ate, taking quick, small bites. When Owen held out the extra biscuits, she wrapped 2 in a napkin and tucked them into her purse. You coming back? He asked. Lucille's hand stopped inside the purse. To get my things, she said. The plastic grocery sack sat beneath the cot. She had unpacked only her toothbrush and prescription bottle. Where are you going? I'll figure it out. That's not an answer. It was good enough when I gave it last night. You said one night because of a promise. That implies you don't have a second one lined up. I've had worse mornings than this, Owen. That doesn't make it a good one. Lucille looked at him for a long moment. I finish at 4. All right, I said I'll come get my things. And I said all right. She buttoned her coat. You have Beth's way of agreeing like it's a threat. Before Owen could ask what that meant, she went outside. He watched from the porch as she descended the trail, stepping around the worst mud without looking back. Near the bottom, the bare trees swallowed the blue of her coat. He remained there until the cold worked through his shirt. Inside, the photograph was gone. The room felt reduced without it. Owen ate a second helping of casserole and began cleaning. He carried the old wasp nest outside on a shovel. He swept mouse droppings, leaves, and the dried bodies of insects into a pile. Beneath the cot, he found 2 square nails, a bottle cap, and a black button. The counter leaned because one of its supports had pulled loose from the wall. He reset it with a longer screw, then tested it by rolling an apple across the boards. The apple stopped in the center. Luxury, he said. He examined the shelves Lucille claimed to have built. They were rough pine, fastened with mismatched screws and nails. The lowest shelf sagged because someone had used it to store a rusted cylinder head. Owen lifted the iron weight and nearly dropped it. Lucille had been right. He set the engine part outside, then removed the shelf. On its underside, hidden against the wall for years, someone had written in pencil, L.H. Shelves, May 1998. Beside it was a crooked drawing of a hammer with eyelashes. Owen ran his thumb over the initials. The pencil had faded, but not disappeared. He repaired the shelf and put it back with the writing still hidden. He could have left the cylinder head where it was. Instead, he carried it to the porch and set it beside the door, unwilling to put Walter's old burden back onto Lucille's work. By noon, sunlight had dried the porch boards. Owen took the empty casserole dish downhill. The farmhouse looked larger now that it did not belong to him. Diane's sport utility vehicle stood near the back entrance, along with a white contractor van. Two men were unloading boxed light fixtures onto the grass. The fixtures were matte black, angular, and completely unlike anything Walter would have chosen. Diane came out holding a folder and wearing the navy cardigan she reserved for appointments. She noticed the casserole dish first. "You ate. It was good. I put extra sausage in it. You need protein if you're going to be hauling things." "Thanks." She took the dish, but did not step aside to let him enter. "Mason says someone stayed at the cabin. He moves fast." He was concerned. He was frightened. "Mason is not frightened of an old woman. I didn't say he was frightened of her." Diane looked toward the contractor van. One of the men carried a box through the back door and left a crescent of mud on the step. "Her name's Lucille Harper," Owen said. Diane closed her eyes briefly. "Of course it is. You remember her. I remember the name. She knew Mom. A lot of people knew your mother for a week or two. She lived at the cabin 5 weeks. I'm aware. Why did Grandpa let people stay there?" Diane tucked the folder beneath her arm. "Because your grandfather liked being useful." "That's your answer?" "It's the answer. He had a weakness for people with stories. Somebody lost a job, somebody's husband drank, somebody needed a place to land. Your mother encouraged it because she enjoyed being surrounded by chaos. Lucille said she made it work. Lucille would. You barely remember her. I remember cleaning that cabin after Dad finally came to his senses." The contractor stepped out again. "Mrs. Mercer, you want the old sconces saved?" Diane turned. "Please, put them in the workshop." "That's Mason's workshop," Owen said when the man left. "It's still part of the property. It's funny how flexible everything is down here." Diane gripped the casserole dish with both hands. "I'm not throwing you out, Owen. You gave me 48 hours. You inherited a home. I inherited a roof with a bucket under it. And I sent you breakfast." The absurdity stopped them both. Diane exhaled first. "I am trying." "At what?" "Not feeling guilty because Dad made a decision none of us asked him to make. You got the house. I got 40 years of deferred maintenance, taxes, and a furnace that sounds like a dying animal. Mason got equipment he has to sort and sell. You did not receive the only imperfect thing. No, mine's just the only one everybody laughs at. I never laughed. You called it charity." Her face changed. She looked past him toward the woods. "Lucille showed me a picture," Owen said. "Mom was in it." Diane went still. "Why did you never tell me she worked up there?" "Because working somewhere for a few months did not undo everything she did after. I didn't ask whether it undid anything." "Owen, your mother could make herself essential. That was part of the problem. She would become the center of a room, convince everyone they couldn't manage without her, and then vanish. People got hurt when they believed her. Did Grandpa? More than anyone." Diane's voice had softened, but her hands remained hard around the dish. "Why did he close the cabin?" "You should ask your visitor." "I did, and she thinks some answers can wait until breakfast." A reluctant flicker touched Diane's mouth. "That does sound like Lucille. Was Mom the reason?" Diane studied him, deciding not whether to lie, but how much truth he could be trusted with. "Beth took money from your grandfather," she said. "Not grocery change. Money he kept for people staying there. After that, Dad shut the door. That is the history Lucille's photograph won't show you." Owen walked back uphill with the empty insult of his clean hands. The cabin looked almost welcoming in the afternoon light. Almost. He split wood until his palms burned, then reset 3 loose porch boards. At 4:30, he heard footsteps. Lucille appeared carrying her grocery sack and a brown paper bag from the diner. "I brought stew," she said. Owen rested the hammer against his thigh. "Diane says my mother stole the cabin money." Lucille stopped at the edge of the porch. "Yes," she said. The plainness of it angered him. "You left that out. You didn't ask me that. I asked why he closed it. And I told you that was a morning question. It's afternoon." Lucille looked at the repaired porch, the cylinder head beside the door, and the shelf visible through the window. Then she lifted the grocery sack. "I can go?" Owen wanted her to. He wanted the cabin restored to the easier emptiness he had inherited. Instead, he looked at the sagging bag, at her work shoes damp from the trail, and at the brown paper bag she had carried 18 miles to feed them both. "The privy collapsed," he said. "I noticed. If you stay until Saturday, we can build something that doesn't lean." Lucille watched him carefully. "Why Saturday?" "Because promises need limits. And after Saturday, we ask a morning question." She stepped onto the porch and handed him the stew. "Fine," she said, "but I'm not digging the hole by myself. I wasn't planning to let you." Lucille studied him, as if checking for sarcasm, then carried her grocery sack inside. The stew came in 2 foam containers, thick with potatoes and pieces of beef that had spent all day becoming tender. Owen ate at the repaired counter, while Lucille sat in the newly steadied chair. Rainwater had dried in pale marks on her work shoes. "You went down to Diane's," she said. "I returned her dish. And asked questions. She says you collect stories." "Diane says that, like it's catching. She says my mother took money meant for people staying here." Lucille broke a dinner roll in half. "She did." "How much?" $640. The precision surprised him. Diane had always described the theft in the vague language reserved for disasters. Cleaned him out, took everything, broke her father's heart. What was it for? Groceries, propane, bus fare, emergency things. What did Beth do with it? Bought pills, far as I know. Owen put down his spoon. Lucille did not soften the words or hurry past them. "Then Diane's right. About the money? About Grandpa closing this place?" "No." Lucille dipped her bread into the stew. "Beth took the cash in February. Walter found her 3 days later at a motel near Ashland. She was sick, ashamed, and mean enough to bite through a tire. He brought her home anyway. Here, to the farmhouse. Diane wouldn't let Beth stay up here. Why not? Because this room was for people starting over, and Diane didn't believe Beth knew how. That sounds like Diane. It also made some sense at the time. Owen hated when Lucille granted Diane fairness. It interfered with the clean argument he was trying to build. "The cabin stayed open?" he asked. "Nearly 4 more years. Diane said he shut the door after Mom stole." Diane puts events in the order that makes her feelings look most reasonable. "And you don't?" "Everybody does. I'm just old enough to admit it." Lucille set the last piece of bread on the rim of her container. "Beth paid the money back," she said. "Took her almost 2 years. Doing what? Whatever she could keep. Motel laundry, cleaning offices. She worked mornings at a produce warehouse for a while. Walter made her hand him something every Friday, even if it was $5. Why didn't he tell anyone? Who says he didn't? He didn't tell me. You were living through the part of your mother you could see. Maybe he didn't think numbers would help." Owen pictured Beth during those years and found only fragments. Her red suitcase at the farmhouse, pancakes after midnight. A summer afternoon when she arrived in a convertible that belonged to somebody named Shane and drove Owen to get ice cream with the top down. Diane had been furious because Beth had not brought him a jacket. He could not attach motel laundry or $5 repayments to any of it. What made Grandpa close the cabin? Lucille looked toward the stove. "That's a longer answer. You keep saying that. Because you keep asking questions that happened over years and wanting them handed over like a receipt. I'm not asking for a receipt. You asked how much she stole." Owen pushed away from the counter. The chair scraped. Lucille waited. He hated that she could sit quietly without making the silence feel accidental. Walter had possessed the same skill. Beth had possessed its opposite. Every pause around her had filled with movement, humming, drawers opening, some idea that had to happen immediately. "Where are you sleeping after Saturday?" Owen asked. The question changed Lucille's face. "I haven't decided." "What happened to your place?" "A pipe burst. That makes a mess. In this case, it made the floor disappear." "Landlord fixing it?" "Landlord sold the trailer and the 4 beside it to a man who plans to haul them off." "You rented?" "For 11 years. And he just sold it?" "He gave notice." The pipe sped up the schedule. "Where have you been staying?" "Motel on Route 6. How long?" 3 weeks. Owen calculated without knowing the rate, enough to explain the grocery sack, enough to turn one promised night into a destination. Why come here now? Because the motel manager wanted another week in advance, and I saw Walter's obituary in a paper somebody left at the counter. You could have called Diane. I could also shave my head with a cheese grater. That good between you? Diane and I don't have a between. Lucille picked up both empty containers and nested one inside the other. I'm looking at a room above a woman's garage Sunday. She works with me. Until then, I have enough for 2 nights at the motel. You said promises need limits. They do. You also said people had to leave the room better. Lucille's eyes narrowed. Careful. You sound like you're building an argument. The roof leaks. The privy's down. Window won't close. That's not a room. That's a hostage situation. You can stay a week. I told you I'm looking at a place Sunday. Then stay until Sunday. I can pay. No. I will not be your charity case. Owen looked around at the patched roof and army cot. I don't think anybody's in danger of making that mistake. Lucille laughed once, reluctantly. You cook, he said. I'll fix things. We both leave it better. I haven't agreed that you're leaving. I haven't agreed that you're staying. Well then, she said, sounds fair. They spent the next morning digging a hole. The privy had collapsed downhill from the cabin in a tangle of gray boards and blackberry vines. Owen salvaged the corrugated roof panel and 2 wall studs. Everything else gave way when he touched it. Lucille stood with a shovel, surveying the ruin. Walter built this. That explains the lean. He believed a level was an insult to instinct. He also believed duct tape could seal a fuel line. Did it? Long enough to create a different problem. They chose a spot farther from the pump. Owen marked a rectangle with stakes and string, then began digging. The soil beneath the leaf mold was heavy red clay. It stuck to the shovel in wet slabs. Lucille watched for several minutes. You planning to supervise? I'm pacing myself. You're holding the shovel. I'm providing moral support. You can do that from the hole. She joined him, though she complained about his dimensions. This is too wide. I don't want the next one collapsing. It fell sideways. The hole wasn't the problem. I'm correcting the entire concept. Men always get ambitious around holes. Near noon, a voice called from the porch. Owen? He climbed out to find Curtis carrying a cordless drill and a paper sack. At 29, Curtis was shorter than Mason, with Walter's heavy eyebrows and the permanent squint of someone who spent too much time examining small machinery. He noticed Lucille waist-deep in the hole. I don't want to know, he said. You brought a drill to a place with no electricity, Owen said. It has a battery. Show off. Curtis held out the paper sack. Mason said, but Mom's making too much of things, which means Mom is making exactly as much of things as she wants. I thought you might need hardware. Inside were exterior screws, hinges, a latch, and 2 new saw blades. From the workshop? Owen asked. From my truck. You don't have to sneak supplies to me. I'm not sneaking. I parked where everybody can see. You could have called. You would have said no. That doesn't mean you ignore me. It does in this family. Lucille climbed from the hole and brushed clay from her uniform slacks. You're the younger one. Apparently I'm famous. Not particularly. Curtis looked at her, then smiled. Unlike Mason, he seemed entertained by resistance. I'm Curtis. Lucille. He nodded toward the hole. How long are you in for? Until Sunday, unless your cousin's measurements kill me. Curtis helped them retrieve usable lumber from an old stack behind the cabin. Most boards were warped, but they found enough straight pieces for framing. He and Owen worked together with the familiar irritation of men who had once shared tools often and had forgotten why they stopped. Curtis measured. Owen cut. You're off by 1/8, Curtis said. It's a privy. Your waist doesn't deserve square corners. Not after casserole. Lucille sat on an overturned bucket and sorted screws by length. If either of you starts discussing seat height, I'm walking into the woods. They did discuss seat height. Lucille won. By late afternoon, 4 framed walls stood on a raised base. The old roof panel fit after Owen trimmed one edge. The door came from a narrow storage closet inside the cabin, where it had been leaning unattached since Walter's time. Beneath its gray paint, at the lower corner, a streak of blue appeared. Owen scraped gently with the back of a screw. More blue. Lucille came close. That was the door. The one in the photograph? She touched the exposed paint with 2 fingers. Beth painted it. Complained the whole time because Walter bought the cheapest brush in Kentucky. Owen looked at the door they had just hung on a privy. Curtis glanced between them. You want to use something else? It's a door, Owen said. Lucille's hand fell. They worked until the structure cast a long shadow through the trees. Curtis left before dark, refusing dinner because Diane expected him. He made Owen keep the drill. Bring it back charged, he said. With what? Figure it out. You inherited simple. Owen raised a hand with one finger extended as Curtis descended the trail. Lucille warmed stew on the stove. Owen scrubbed clay from his arms using water from the kettle. Every muscle from his shoulders to his calves had tightened. You could strip the door, Lucille said. Why? Find the letters, so I can sit over a hole beneath an inspirational message. It wasn't inspirational. What was it? A reminder. To leave the privy ready? She gave him a dry look. After dinner, Owen carried the chair outside and set it beneath the porch light that did not work. The sky was clear. Without the farmhouse lights visible through summer leaves, the cabin felt farther from everything than it was. Lucille joined him with the photograph. She sat on the top step and laid it across her knees. Owen could now see that the blue on the old door matched the color beneath the gray paint. Who made the table? He asked. Everybody in the picture. That sounds inefficient. It was. What happened that day? We finished it. 8 beans and cornbread. Beth made us take the photograph because she said nobody ever records the day something begins. Did she write the words? Painted those too. Owen examined his mother's face. What did they mean? If you used the room, you left it ready for whoever came next. Sheets washed, wood stacked, something repaired, no debt following you out. What if somebody left it worse? Then Beth went after them. He looked at Lucille. She was 5'4", Lucille said, but very repetitive. That I remember. A small smile moved across Lucille's mouth. She handed him the photograph. It was the first time she had let go of it. Owen held it by the edges. Walter's thumb had left a pale half-moon on the table's dark wood. Beth's painted cheek looked almost like a bruise until the light caught its color. You keep it, Lucille said. He looked up. You carried it all this way. That was the point. I don't have anywhere safe. Make somewhere. She rose and went inside, leaving him alone with the picture. Owen found an empty cracker tin among Walter's things. He wiped it clean, wrapped the photograph in the napkin Lucille had used, and placed it inside. Then he set the tin on Lucille's repaired shelf. On the shelf's hidden underside, her initials held up the weight. Sunday morning, Owen woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Lucille swearing at the stove. You let it die again, she said. I'm beginning to think it's mortal. You stacked the wood wrong. It was burning when I went to sleep. So was Rome. She had found Walter's dented percolator and produced coffee strong enough to loosen paint. Owen drank it from a chipped mug while standing on the porch. The new privy sat among the trees, unexpectedly upright. Looks good, he said. It looks judgmental. That's the square corners. You gonna finish the door? Patches of gray paint had flaked away around the edges, revealing the older blue. Owen could have stripped it in an hour. He had sandpaper, and Curtis had left the drill with a wire brush attachment. Eventually. Lucille made a small sound that suggested eventually was where most useful intentions went to die. At 10, she packed her grocery sack. She folded the diner uniform she had washed in the enamel pot and draped near the stove. Her prescription bottle went into the side pocket. The toothbrush went into a sandwich bag. The process took less than a minute. You don't own anything else? Owen asked. I own plenty. Most of it's in the back of my car. What about furniture? It belonged to the trailer, if you can call that couch furniture. You seeing the room above the garage now? At 11, he checked his phone. The battery had died sometime during the night. Want company? No, I need to get to town. For what? To find a way to charge this. Call about work. Lucille's expression became too neutral. What kind of work? The kind where somebody pays me. You know what I meant? Electrical if I can get it. Demolition if I can't. You licensed? Not yet. What stopped you? My grandfather got sick. That stopped you for 3 years? He didn't schedule dialysis around exams. Lucille put on her coat. There's an outlet at the diner, then I'll ride with you. You don't have a vehicle? I had access to Grandpa's truck. And now, Mason has access to Grandpa's truck. She nodded as if adding another item to a private list. They walked down the trail. Lucille's car was parked on the gravel shoulder near the county road, an old Buick the color of a canned pea. The back seat was filled to the windows with plastic storage tubs, bedding, a lamp, and a potted plant that had lost most of its leaves. Owen opened the passenger door. A box occupied the footwell. "Move it carefully," Lucille said. "Dishes." "I thought your things were in the car," I said most. "Where's the rest?" "Diner storeroom?" "Val has my television." "Who's Val?" "Woman whose garage I'm looking at." "You stored your television with the person renting you a room?" she offered. "That sounds promising. It's a small television." The Buick started on the second attempt. Lucille leaned toward the dashboard, listening until the engine settled. "Seatbelt sticks," she said. "Pull twice, then apologize." "To the belt?" "It responds to respect." The room above Val's garage was 6 miles from the diner, behind a brick ranch house with white shutters. Val met them in the driveway wearing pink slippers and an apologetic expression. She was a broad woman in her 50s with bleached hair twisted into a knot. She hugged Lucille before saying hello to Owen. "I tried calling," she said. "My phone's in the car." "You said 11. I know. I'm sorry." Lucille did not move toward the garage steps. "What happened?" Val folded her arms against the cold. "My brother and Stephanie split again." "Again, permanent, or again, Tuesday?" "He says permanent. He said that at Thanksgiving." "I know. And Christmas." "I know, Lucy." Val looked at Owen as if he might serve as an appeals court. He examined the white garage door. "He's already got his things in there," Val said. "Showed up last night with his dog and the recliner." "The brown recliner? I wish." Lucille nodded once. "All right, I can keep asking around. That's kind. I mean it. I know." Val touched Lucille's sleeve. "You want your television?" "Not today. You sure? I don't have anywhere to watch it." They returned to the Buick. Lucille opened the driver's door and put one hand on the roof, but did not get in. "How permanent is Tuesday?" Owen asked. "Don't." "Could improve by Wednesday. Her brother's 61 years old. He has perfected leaving women and returning to his sister. He's not improving. You could take the recliner." Lucille gave him a look. "Get in the car." She drove to the diner without speaking. Owen kept his eyes on the road and resisted the urge to offer solutions that would require money neither of them had. Harper's Grill occupied the end of a low strip near the highway. The name was painted on the front window in red letters, though Lucille explained immediately that she did not own it. "Old owner was a Harper," she said. "No relation. I've been correcting people for 14 years. Inside, red vinyl booths lined the windows. The air smelled of bacon grease and lemon cleaner. 2 men sat at the counter over coffee, arguing about whether an engine part was worth driving to Tennessee for. A woman behind the register looked up. "Tell me you got it," she said. "Didn't get it." "Oh, Lucy, this is Owen." The woman's sympathy vanished into briskness. "You Beth's?" Owen stopped. Lucille took off her coat. "Tammy." "What?" "Look at him." Tammy was thin, dark-haired, and perhaps 50. Reading glasses hung on a beaded cord around her neck. "You knew my mother?" Owen asked. "Knew of her. Met her a couple times." Tammy pointed toward a booth. "Sit. I'll get you pie. It's 10:30. That changes the clock, not pie." Lucille carried her grocery sack through a swinging door marked Employees. Owen sat near an outlet and plugged in his phone. Tommy brought coffee and a slice of coconut cream pie without asking what kind he wanted. "She okay?" he asked. Lucille, "No, but she's excellent at arranging her face. She stayed at the cabin." "I know. How?" "She called from the payphone yesterday." "There's a payphone?" "In the hall by the bathrooms. Hasn't worked since 2011. She used mine." Owen looked toward the swinging door. Tammy smiled. "She told me not to mention it. Now we both have something to feel bad about." His phone came alive with 3 missed calls and a voicemail. 2 calls were from Diane. The third was from Hal Reese, an electrical contractor Owen had worked for before Walter's treatments consumed his schedule. He listened to the voicemail. "Owen, it's Hal. Curtis says you're looking. I've got 2 weeks tearing out an old insurance office, maybe rough in after if the owner signs off. Need somebody Monday at 7. Call by noon, or I'll find a teenager with fewer opinions." Owen called. Hal answered with, "You still know which end of a hammer is taxable? I can relearn. 7 tomorrow. Old Bexley building on Fulton. I don't have a truck. I'm hiring your hands, not your transportation. I can get there. Wear boots you dislike." The call ended before Owen could ask what the job paid. Hal had always considered details a form of pessimism. Tammy refilled his coffee. You get hired? For 2 weeks. That sounds almost happy. Depends what's in the walls. Usually mold and somebody's bad decision. Lucille emerged wearing a fresh uniform and carrying an order pad. Her face had been arranged exactly as Tammy described. You can leave your things at the cabin, Owen said. She tore a page from the order pad. I'm working. I see that. Then why are you discussing my homelessness beside table 6? The two men at the counter stopped arguing. Owen lowered his voice. You don't have somewhere to go. I can afford the motel for 2 nights. And then? I will make another arrangement. What arrangement? I don't know yet. Come back to the cabin. Lucille's eyes moved toward the counter. The men became intensely interested in their coffee. That room belongs to you, she said. Right. Which makes inviting you my business. You've known me 3 days. Long 3 days. Her mouth almost moved. I'm starting a job tomorrow, Owen said. I'll be gone all day. I need somebody to make sure the stove doesn't become Rome. You're not clever enough to use my jokes against me. Stay until you find a place. You cook sometimes. Help fix the roof. No rent, no charity, it's not. The room gets better. Lucille looked at him long enough that Tammy began wiping an already clean section of counter to hide her attention. 1 week, Lucille said. You won't find a place in 1 week. Then you can ask me again. Fine. And I buy groceries. We split them. You don't have money? I start work tomorrow. You haven't been paid tomorrow. We split after I get paid. She wrote something on her order pad, tore off the page, and placed it face down in front of him. Your check, she said. I didn't order. You ate pie. I thought Tammy gave it to me. This is a business. Owen turned the paper over. 1 slice pie, fix buzzing light over grill. He looked up at the fluorescent fixture. One end flickered and buzzed. That needs a ballast, he said. Tammy reached beneath the counter and produced a new one in a box. You keep electrical parts beside the ketchup? Hal told me what to buy 6 months ago. He never came back. Owen removed his jacket. The job took 20 minutes. Tammy shut off the breaker, and Owen replaced the ballast while standing on a milk crate Lucille insisted was older than he was. The two men at the counter offered contradictory advice until Tammy threatened to charge them labor. When the light came on without buzzing, the room seemed suddenly quieter. One of the men looked up. You do house calls? He asked. Sometimes. My back porch light hasn't worked since Easter. Bulb? I'm not an idiot. Tammy slid a paper napkin toward him. Write your number. Owen did. The other man wanted him to look at a ceiling fan. Tammy wanted the loose outlet by the pie case fixed after closing. Lucille moved between tables, pouring coffee and telling everyone Owen had one job already and should be allowed to finish his pie. He watched her work. She knew who needed decaf without asking and which customer wanted the check placed face down. She remembered a truck driver's mother was having surgery and insulted another man until he ordered something besides bacon. Nothing about her suggested helplessness. The grocery sack hidden in the storeroom did not erase the fact that she could manage the entire room with one coffee pot. That evening, she drove them back to the county road. Owen carried one of her storage tubs up the trail despite her protest. Inside, the cabin smelled of cold ash. Lucille set her grocery sack beneath the cot again. Owen took the photograph from the cracker tin and propped it on the shelf while they relit the stove. Beth and Walter appeared slowly as the room brightened. 1 week, Lucille reminded him. Then I ask again. You may not like my answer. You may not like the question. She handed him a piece of kindling. Stack it crosswise, she said. If you're going to leave before sunrise, I'm not waking up to your dead fire. The word leave caught him unexpectedly. He placed the wood the way she showed him, and this time the flame found air between the pieces. Lucille watched until it held. Better, she said. It was not praise exactly, but the room warmed around it. At 5:45 Monday morning, Lucille handed Owen a travel mug and told him the Buick did not operate before coffee. Neither do I. The Buick has seniority. She drove with one hand on the wheel and the other wrapped around her mug. Dawn had not yet reached the hills. The headlights found mailbox posts, wet pavement, and the occasional pale eyes of an animal waiting to make a poor decision. You don't have to drive me every day, Owen said. No, only the days you intend to arrive. I'll work something out. Don't work it out before I finish this coffee. The old Bexley building stood on Fulton Street between a pawn shop and an empty pharmacy. Hal Reese's truck was already at the curb. Hal leaned against the tailgate eating an egg biscuit, while three other men unloaded pry bars and contractor bags. He was 50, thick through the shoulders, with a beard that always contained sawdust by noon, no matter what material they were working with. "You got thinner," he told Owen. "You got friendlier. Dialysis over?" Owen glanced toward the Buick. Lucille waited at the light. "Grandpa died." Hal lowered the biscuit. "Damn, I'm sorry. Thanks. You still know how to turn off a breaker? If I say no, do I get sent home?" "No. I give you to Dale." Dale, a heavy man in a camouflage cap, raised one hand. "I've been shocked so many times I can taste outlets." "See," Hal said. Motivation. The insurance office had closed 2 years earlier. Dust lay across fake plants and framed posters of smiling families beneath umbrellas. Hal wanted the partitions removed, carpeting pulled, and ceiling grid stripped before the electrician arrived for rough-in. Owen spent the first hour dragging desks to a rented dumpster. By 8, sweat ran down his back, despite the cold. He found a coffee mug in a drawer, 3 hardened mints, and a calendar still open to a month nobody had returned to finish. Dale stood on a ladder cutting cable above the suspended ceiling. "Breakers off?" Owen asked. Hal killed the panel. A fluorescent fixture flickered overhead. Owen looked at it, then at the cable in Dale's pliers. "Stop." Dale froze. Owen followed the lit fixture to a conduit disappearing through the rear wall. The neighboring pharmacy had once shared part of the electrical system, and somebody had fed one row of lights from its panel. Hal tested the cable. The meter chirped. Dale climbed down. "I knew that," he said. "You were holding cutters. I was testing him." Hal looked at Owen. "Your opinion's just earned another day. Only one? Don't get greedy." By noon, Owen's hands had reopened 2 old calluses. He ate a sandwich on the loading dock and watched Hal study the building plans. "Curtis says you're up at Walter's cabin. Everybody talks to Curtis. He answers his phone. I'm working on it." Hal folded the plans. "That place have power?" "One line that should be disconnected before it kills somebody." "You staying there?" "For now." Hal nodded without offering pity. "Rough-in starts next week if the owner quits changing walls." "I can use you." "Doing demolition?" "Depends if you remember anything." Owen looked at his dust-covered clothes. "I remembered the live cable. Dale remembers it now, too." At 4:30, Hal dropped him at Harper's Grill. Owen's shoulders ached from carrying drywall, and powdered plaster had turned his boots pale. Lucille placed a hamburger in front of him before he sat. "I can pay for this Friday," he said. "You can pay for it by not leaving dust on my booth." He slid onto the seat carefully. Tammy leaned over the counter. "Mr. Barlow called twice about his porch light. Thinks you've abandoned the project. He met me yesterday. He's had 24 hours to become attached." Lucille refilled Owen's coffee. "Eat first, porch light after. You working until close? Somebody has to make sure Tammy doesn't give away pie." "I give away pie strategically," Tammy said. Mr. Barlow lived 3 streets away in a narrow house with a porch crowded by wind chimes. The light problem was not the bulb. Water had entered through a cracked mounting block and corroded the wires until one broke. Owen replaced the block, remade the connections, and sealed the fixture. Mr. Barlow stood beneath the ladder, describing everything the previous homeowner had done incorrectly. When the light came on, he squinted up at it. "How much?" "40. "For an hour?" For the part, the ladder, and knowing which wire not to lick. Mr. Barlow paid without bargaining. Then he led Owen through the house to show him a ceiling fan that clicked. By the time Lucille finished her shift, Owen had $40 in his pocket and 3 more names written on a diner napkin. On the drive home, he kept unfolding the bills and smoothing them against his leg. "You'll wear the numbers off," Lucille said. "First money I've made in 2 months. You made your grandfather's care possible. That didn't pay. Work and money are related. They're not twins. The electric company accepts one. Then you should probably keep the money." He stopped touching it. At the cabin, Lucille had left a pot of beans near the stove and stacked fresh wood under the eaves. Her grocery sack was no longer under the cot. 2 storage tubs had appeared beside it. Owen looked at them. "Tammy drove me up at lunch," she said. "You're moving in. I'm removing things from my car so I can see out the back window. Different process entirely. 1 week. You keep saying that, like I'm counting. You are counting." He was. The routine formed without either of them admitting it. Lucille drove him before dawn, worked the breakfast shift, and picked him up or left the Buick at the diner when her schedule ran late. Owen brought water from the pump and split wood after work. She cooked because he had proved capable of burning canned soup. He washed dishes because she disliked the way he stacked them. On Wednesday, he brought home 2 discarded cabinet doors from the demolition. He used one to repair the counter and cut the other into trim for the window. On Thursday, Lucille returned with a piece of heavy canvas. "Booth covering," she said. Tammy replaced one. "We can stretch this under the roof until you patch it." I'm not climbing." "That sounds like you mean me. I'll criticize from below." He climbed onto the roof before sunset. Lucille held the ladder and warned him whenever he did something she considered reckless, which was whenever he moved. From above, he could see the farmhouse through the bare trees. New black light fixtures flanked the back door. Mason's truck stood beside the workshop. Walter's old green pickup was parked behind it, unused. A second vehicle turned into the yard. Diane emerged from it and looked uphill. 10 minutes later, she reached the cabin wearing loafers entirely unsuited to the trail. She had brought a bundle of mail tied with a rubber band. "I'm not keeping your correspondence at the house," she said. "Hello to you, too." "Hello." She noticed Lucille holding the ladder. Lucille? Diane. Neither woman smiled. Owen climbed down. The mail included an insurance statement, 2 advertisements, and a notice about his cell phone bill. Diane looked past him into the cabin. The cot was neatly made. Lucille's tub stood beside it. Beth's photograph, still protected by the cracker tin when not being handled, had been propped on the shelf while Owen worked. "She's staying now?" Diane asked. "Until she finds a place." "That was not what Dad intended when he left you the cabin. He told you?" "I know what he intended. Useful talent." Diane's mouth tightened. "The trail crosses my land. I need to know who is coming and going." "Lucille, today." "What about tomorrow?" "I'm not opening a hotel. That isn't what concerns me." Lucille released the ladder. "Say what does." Diane looked at her. "You all came with emergencies. Dad got involved. Beth got involved. Then you moved on, and we stayed with the aftermath." Lucille's face remained still. "You think we didn't have aftermath?" she asked. "You got to leave. I left because that was the purpose of the room. And when you came back, I didn't. Until Walter died." "Exactly." Owen stepped between them without physically moving. "Lucille lost her place. She's helping repair the cabin. That's all." Diane pointed toward the canvas on the roof. "And when the next person comes, or 5 people, you don't know what this became. I know what you say it became. I cleaned blood off that floor." The woods seemed to quiet around them. Lucille looked toward the cabin door. "Whose?" Owen asked. Diane's anger faltered. "A man Beth brought here. He fell against the stove." "That's not what closed the room," Lucille said. "No, it was one of 20 reasons." "You keep 20 reasons because one hurts too much." Diane's face went pale. Owen saw Lucille regret the sentence as soon as it left her. She reached for it too late. Diane turned to Owen. "No more vehicles in the yard. Anyone visiting this cabin parks at the county road. The trail stays clear. If you need mail, change your address. Fine. And don't use the farmhouse trash bins for construction waste." "I haven't. I'm making it clear." She walked away before either of them could answer. Lucille watched her descend the trail. "What was the one reason?" Owen asked. She picked up the ladder. "Not tonight." "Convenient. I said something cruel because she made me feel accused. A true thing can still be used cruelly." Owen took the other end of the ladder. "You're not going to tell me what it was? I'm going to help you keep rain off your bed." They carried the ladder inside without speaking. Near midnight, weather moved across the ridge. Rain struck the canvas, pooled briefly, and ran off beyond the wall. Not one drop fell into the basin. Owen lay on the floor, listening to the dry metal. From the cot, Lucille said, "You can take this tomorrow. I'm fine. I'm leaving Saturday." He turned his head. "You found somewhere?" "No." "Then you're not leaving." 1 week was the agreement. The roof isn't done. That is not an agreement. That is weather. Owen sat up. The stove cast a red line across the floor between them. "Stay another week," he said. "We'll write down what each of us does, if that makes you feel better. I don't need a ledger to know what I owe." "Maybe I do." Lucille studied him in the dimness. "Your mother kept a list," she said, "of debts, of what people could do. Owen waited. Not tonight? He asked. Tomorrow. In the morning, Lucille removed the lowest shelf she had built. She turned it over beside the window. Beyond her initials and the hammer with eyelashes, faint pencil lines ran beneath 20 years of grime. Owen had mistaken them for scratches. Lucille dampened a cloth and wiped gently. Names appeared. Beside each one was a job: roof patch, oil change, Thursday supper, drive Ray, mend coats, stack wood. Near the center, in Beth's slanted handwriting, someone had written, Owen keeping Walter busy. He stared at his own name. Lucille touched the words once. You were useful here before you ever knew the room existed, she said. That's not me, Owen said. Lucille looked from the pencil marks to his face. Of course it is. The photograph was taken before I was born. Her confidence held for 2 seconds, then broke. Oh. Strong argument. There was another Owen. Convenient. Owen Sailor. Worked maintenance at the mill. Big ears, no chin. And his job was keeping Walter busy? He could turn a 10-minute repair into a 3-day discussion. Owen stared at the writing, embarrassed by how quickly he had wanted it to belong to him. Lucille rubbed at the line with her thumb. I remembered your name being here. You remembered wrong. Yes. She said it without defending herself. He had begun treating her memory as a window he could look through whenever he wanted. Now, the glass showed its age. Beth wrote this? He asked. Some of it. Walter added things. So did I. Why put it under a shelf? It wasn't under the shelf then. Lucille turned the board lengthwise. A row of filled nail holes ran along one edge. This hung on the wall. When it got full, Walter used it for shelves. The board with names. One of them. You said it was gone. I thought it was. Owen read what remained. Several names had faded into gray smudges. Others were legible. Marvin, fix pump. Joyce, hem curtains. Louis, truck brakes. Lucille, shelves. At the bottom, Beth had written her own name. Beth, keeping the list. Owen touched the letters lightly. He recognized the handwriting from birthday cards and scraps she used to leave on Walter's refrigerator. Back tonight. Don't let Diane throw my pie away. Tell Owen I called? Why was this important? He asked. People came in believing they had nothing. Beth made them name one thing they could do. What if they couldn't do anything? She didn't accept that answer. Sounds exhausting. It was. She once made a man list whistling. What did the room need with whistling? Nothing. He needed to stop saying nothing. Lucille lifted the board toward the shelf brackets. Owen stopped her. Don't put it back yet. Where do you want it? He cleared a place on the counter. They set it there beneath the window, names facing up. At work, he thought about the board while tearing nails from wall studs. Hal had moved him from hauling debris to tracing old circuits with the electrician. A quiet woman named Renee Park, who tested everything twice and distrusted labels on panels. Somebody wrote storage on this breaker, she said. Any guesses? Could be storage. It controls the men's bathroom. Maybe they stored men there. She looked at him over her safety glasses. Hal said you had opinions. He warned everybody. Renee handed him a coil of cable. Run this to the rear office. Don't make me regret listening to him. The work came back through his hands before his mind trusted it. Measure, pull, leave enough at the box, keep bends smooth, protect the cable where metal could bite. Walter had taught him to repair things by slowing down until the mistake became visible. At lunch, Hal dropped an old electrical codebook beside him. New edition's coming, he said. This one's out of date. So you're giving me wrong answers? I'm giving you most of the right answers at a discount. Owen opened it. Hal had underlined sections and written rude comments in the margins. You still planning to test? Hal asked. Eventually. That date's not on the calendar. I need documented hours. You have some with me. More if you stay through rough-in. Owen looked at the stripped office around them. Owner signed off. Owner changed the break room twice, which means yes. Hal walked away before Owen could thank him. That evening, Owen propped the codebook beside the photograph on Lucille's shelf. The shelf was becoming the only place in the cabin where objects looked deliberately placed. Lucille stood at the counter, copying the old list into a spiral notebook from the diner. What are you doing? Saving what's legible. You just told me memory gets things wrong. Pencil gets wet. He looked over her shoulder. Her handwriting was narrow and upright. You staying another week? That depends. On? Whether we can arrange it without you pretending I'm helping more than I am. You cook, you drive, you found the name board. Accidentally. You also criticize. That's a professional service. Owen found a piece of smooth paneling left from the demolition and placed it on the counter. With a carpenter's pencil, he drew a line down the center. On one side, he wrote Owen. On the other, Lucille. Under his name, wood, water, repairs. Under hers, meals, rides, roof canvas. Lucille read it. You're turning us into a scoreboard. I'm making the agreement visible. You're counting. So are you. She took the pencil from him and added groceries under her name. Owen wrote privy under his. Lucille crossed it out. That was shared. He wrote half privy on each side. That is the stupidest thing I've seen all week. Then we agree it's balanced. She tried not to smile and failed. One more week, she said. Fine. If I find a place sooner, I leave. That's usually how moving works. And the cot alternates. No. You've slept on the floor for 7 nights. I'm younger. That's not a moral achievement. It's my cabin. Then put yourself on the list under stubborn. She did it for him. Mason came up Friday afternoon while Owen was patching the roof with shingles Hal had salvaged from another job. He brought Walter's green pickup. Owen climbed down and stared at the truck. You trying to make me jealous? Mom wants the porch sconces installed. Call an electrician. She says you are one. Yesterday she said I attract strangers. She contains multitudes. Mason looked through the open cabin door. The repaired counter, clean floor, and stacked firewood seemed to disorient him. His eyes rested on the contribution board, then moved to the old name board below the window. You found that? It was a shelf. I remember Grandpa tearing them down. The lists? All the junk on the walls? Why? Mason shrugged. He was angry. At Beth? Probably. You don't know? I was around, Owen. I wasn't taking minutes. Owen returned to the ladder. Mason touched one of the new shingles stacked on the porch. This is looking decent. Careful. I might think you approve. I'm saying the cabin has potential. It has 12 feet by 16 feet. People pay for rustic. Owen looked at him. Mason raised both hands. Not doing anything. Just saying. Once the farmhouse is finished, we could market the whole property for weekend retreats. The cabin could be an add-on. You know what I mean? I don't. The land fits together. Mom's place, your cabin, the woods. It's stupid to act like lines on paper make them separate. Those lines were important when you wanted me out of the farmhouse. I didn't want you out. You carried my cot because you needed help carrying your cot. Owen stepped off the ladder. You want the sconces installed? Yes. Truck for the weekend. Mason laughed. That's Grandpa's truck. Actually, it's yours. The correction removed some of Mason's amusement. I need it Monday. You don't use it. How would you know? It hasn't moved since the funeral. Mason looked toward the farmhouse, though the trees hid most of it. One weekend, he said, and 2 sheets of exterior plywood from the workshop. Those aren't mine, then call Curtis. You're charging family? I'm trading labor. For the room, for me. Mason studied him with an expression that was not quite irritation. It might have been respect if either of them had known what to do with that. Fine, he said. But if Mom hates the sconces, you're talking to her. She chose them. Exactly. They drove down together. The inside of Walter's truck smelled like dust, coffee, and the peppermint candies he kept in the center console. Owen opened it and found 3 wrappers, a tire gauge, and 1 surviving candy fused to the paper. Mason watched him hold it. I cleaned most of his stuff out, he said. I see. It's in a box. I didn't throw it away. I didn't ask. You do that. Do what? Make people defend things before you accuse them. Owen shut the console. Learned from family. The new sconces were angular black cages surrounding exposed bulbs. Diane stood on the porch while Owen removed the old brass fixtures. They look like something from a prison, he said. They're transitional. To where? They were recommended? By the furnace guy? Diane crossed her arms. Can you install them without commentary? No. That costs extra. She held the ladder anyway. The first fixture went up smoothly. Behind the second, Owen found brittle insulation and a cracked box. He showed Diane before replacing it. That could have sparked inside the wall. Her expression changed. Was it dangerous? It wasn't good. Your grandfather said he checked those. He probably did 15 years ago. Diane looked at the open wall, then at Owen's hands. You learned more from him than I realized, she said. Hal taught me electrical. That isn't what I meant. For once, she did not explain. Owen finished near dusk. Mason signed over the truck key for the weekend and loaded 2 plywood sheets into the bed. As Owen prepared to leave, Diane brought out a covered bowl. "Chicken and dumplings," she said. The bowl comes back. Of course. Her gaze moved toward the truck bed. "Are you building more things? Finishing what collapsed? Just remember what we discussed about visitors." "I remember." Back at the cabin, Lucille inspected the plywood. "You sold your labor cheap," she said. "I got a truck. For 2 days. And chicken." She lifted the lid. "That improves the deal." Owen set the old name board against the wall while they ate. The new contribution board stood beside it, half joke and half contract. Lucille tapped Beth's entry with one finger. "Thursday supper," she said. "What about it?" "The diner throws away too much food. Mr. Barlow has 2 broken lamps. Curtis left that drill. You have people asking for small repairs. I have a job. I didn't say every night. No strangers. I was a stranger last week." "Exactly. Look what happened." She ignored that. "One meal, people bring something useful or something that needs fixing. Diane will lose her mind. They can park at the county road. That's not the comforting part." Lucille waited. Owen looked at the photograph. The long table in it did not exist anymore. They had 1 chair, 1 cot, and 3 plates. "We don't have anywhere to put people," he said. Lucille smiled as if he had answered a different question. "Then I suppose the room needs a table." Owen built the table too large. He knew it before the legs were attached, but by then Lucille had watched him measure everything twice, and he preferred structural failure to admitting she had been right. The top used most of 1 plywood sheet, framed underneath with straight boards salvaged from the demolition site. He made trestle legs so it could be carried through the cabin door, though each trestle weighed enough to discourage frequent movement. Lucille stood on the porch with her arms folded. "You planning to seat the county? 6 people. 6 people with elbows like farm equipment. It's a work table. So was the one in the photograph. It had grace. It was crooked. It was gracefully crooked." Owen drove the final screw and turned the table upright. It occupied half the porch. Lucille walked around it. "We'll need a bigger cabin." "We are not building a bigger cabin. I wrote it under your name." He looked at the contribution board propped inside. Beneath Owen's list, she had added West Wing. He crossed it out and wrote table. She added too large. The truck allowed him to bring discarded lumber from the Bexley building and haul 2 bags of trash to the county transfer station. It also took him to 3 small repair jobs Saturday afternoon. He replaced a kitchen outlet for a woman who followed him from room to room, apologizing for dust that did not exist. He fixed a bathroom fan with a washcloth tangled around its motor. The 3rd customer wanted him to repair an extension cord that had been taped in 4 places. Owen held up the cord. "No." The man blinked. "No what?" "No repair." "I'll sell you a new one for what I paid. Seems wasteful. So does setting your shed on fire." By the time Owen returned the green pickup Sunday evening, he had earned enough to buy groceries, fuel, roofing nails, and a waterproof cover for the photograph. He also bought a small battery lantern. Diane inspected the truck's tires as though he might have changed them. "Everything go all right?" she asked. "Truck survived. I meant at the cabin. We built a table." Her eyes lifted toward the ridge. "Why?" "To put things on." "Owen, what?" She seemed on the verge of asking a different question. Instead, she held out the old peppermint candy from the console, now sealed inside a sandwich bag. "You left this. It was Grandpa's. I know. You keep it. I have enough of his things. So do I." They stood with the bag between them until Mason came from the workshop and took it. "I'll keep the fossilized candy," he said. Problem solved. Diane looked irritated, but Owen was grateful enough not to say so. The work week filled quickly. At Bexley, Renee let Owen begin setting boxes and drilling runs for new cable. Hal signed his hours each afternoon on a form Owen had nearly forgotten existed. At the diner, Tammy collected repair requests on order slips and pinned them beside the kitchen door. By Tuesday, there were 11. Owen removed 6. "What are you doing?" Lucille asked. "These people want free work. They're asking. This one says lamp flickers can pay in banana bread. Erlene's banana bread is excellent. Does the electric company accept it? You keep returning to that question." He separated the slips. "I can do 2 after work, paying jobs first. 1 trade if it's useful. No rewiring houses for casseroles." Lucille watched him create 3 columns on the back of a paper placemat. You're making another list. I like lists. Beth did too. That doesn't make it hereditary, no. But it might explain why you're glaring at a placemat. Owen chose Mr. Barlow's 2 lamps and a broken toaster. Tammy wanted removed from the diner before it killed someone. Thursday, Lucille said. Bring them Thursday. You invited people? Tammy. Mr. Barlow. Curtis if he brings chairs. How many chairs? Enough. How many people? Fewer than the county. He pointed a pencil at her. Nobody stays. It's supper, not a siege. No alcohol, no borrowing money, no showing up with a house that needs rewiring. Lucille wrote his rules beneath the repair list. Anything else? Everybody leaves by 9. What happens at 9? I become unpleasant. You'll have to distinguish it somehow. Thursday evening, Owen returned from work to find 4 folding chairs stacked beside the porch and Lucille stirring beans in a large pot. Tammy had brought cornbread, coleslaw, and a crock of pulled pork. Mr. Barlow arrived carrying 2 lamps wrapped in towels and a carton containing a pecan pie. You said bring something useful, he told Owen. Which one is useful? Depends how good you are with lamps. Curtis climbed the trail last, balancing a drill case and a bag of ice. There is no refrigerator, Owen said. I'm aware. What's the ice for? My tea. You carried 8 pounds of ice uphill for tea? I made a commitment. Tammy arranged food across the oversized table. For the first time, its scale looked almost reasonable. The adults moved around one another awkwardly, trying to determine whether they were guests, customers, or volunteers. Lucille solved it by handing Mr. Barlow a stack of plates. Set those out. I'm 72. Then you've had time to learn. Curtis examined the first lamp. Its brass base was shaped like a swan with a green shade balanced above its wings. You actually want this repaired? He asked. My wife bought that lamp in 1986, Mr. Barlow said. She's been gone 9 years, and it's still the only thing in my house that knows where she would have sat. Curtis's humor disappeared. Needs a new socket? Maybe cord. I brought a cord, mister. Barlow produced a neatly coiled replacement from his coat pocket. Owen set up tools at one end of the table, while food occupied the other. He showed Curtis how to disassemble the socket without cracking the old brass shell. Tammy placed the broken toaster in front of Lucille. This is not a repair, Owen said after looking inside. It only sparks on the left. It is now a contribution to the trash. Tommy seemed offended. That toaster has worked since my first marriage. So did your first marriage, Lucille said, until it didn't. They ate before the beans cooled. Conversation moved strangely at first, catching on weather, road repairs, and the price of eggs. Then Curtis told a story about Mason backing Walter's truck into a load of split wood and blaming the emergency brake. Tammy described a customer who had proposed marriage every Tuesday for 6 years, but tipped only on Fridays. Mr. Barlow noticed the old name board beneath the window. What's that? Lucille passed it to him. He read the surviving entries. I knew Luis Alvarez. Truck brakes, Owen said. Ran the gas station by the mill. Still has a garage over on Carver, unless he finally retired. He hasn't, Curtis said. He refuses to retire because nobody else knows how to listen to an engine. Walter trusted him, Lucille said. Mr. Barlow ran one finger beneath Beth's handwriting. This from the old room? Lucille nodded. I heard about it. Never came up here. Good for you, she said. What does that mean? It means you didn't need it. Mr. Barlow looked around the cabin. Everybody needs a room sometime. The sentence settled without anyone improving it. After supper, Tammy washed plates while Lucille dried. Mr. Barlow held a flashlight, and Owen rewired the swan lamp. Curtis worked on the second, a plain ceramic base that had belonged to Mr. Barlow's mother. When both lights came on, they placed them at opposite ends of the table. Their warm circles overlapped in the middle. Mr. Barlow tried to pay. Owen refused because he had brought the pie and cord. The pie was for supper. So was the repair. That's not how business works. It is tonight. Mr. Barlow put the folded bills into Owen's shirt pocket anyway. Owen returned them to his coat. Mr. Barlow slipped them beneath the lantern. Lucille watched the exchange twice before taking the money and writing groceries on an envelope. Now it belongs to the room, she said. Neither of you can act noble about it. That's theft, Mr. Barlow said. No, Lucille replied. We have exact historical standards for that. Owen looked at her. She did not apologize, but regret moved through her face. Tammy changed the subject by cutting pie. Near 8:30, headlights moved through the trees below. A car door closed in the farmhouse yard. We parked at the county road, Curtis said. Owen stepped to the porch. Diane appeared on the trail carrying a flashlight and wearing boots this time. Her beam moved across the faces around the table, the lamps and the plates. "What is this?" she asked. "Supper," Owen said. "I can see food. Then you've got the idea." Diane looked at Curtis. "You didn't tell me. I'm an adult. I'm aware of the legal situation." Tammy carried a plate toward her. "There's pork left. No thank you? Pecan pie?" Diane hesitated. "No." Lucille remained near the cabin door, dish towel in her hands. "We followed your rules," Owen said. "They parked at the road. Nobody's staying. This week, yes." This week. Diane's flashlight caught the photograph on the shelf. Owen had removed it from the cracker tin before supper. Beth stood beside Walter in the pool of lantern light. Diane crossed the porch and picked it up. "Lucille gave it to me," Owen said. "I know whose it was. You've seen it. I took it." Lucille went still. Diane turned the photograph over. On the back, almost invisible in faded blue ink, were the words, "Property of Diane Mercer, age 29. "I mailed copies to everyone in it," Diane said. "Beth made me. She said if she handled the envelopes, nobody would get them." Owen looked at Lucille. "You said you kept meaning to bring it back." "I did." "It was Diane's picture." "It was my copy," Diane said. "Lucille must have taken it before she left." "I asked," Lucille replied. "You said you never wanted to see any of us again. That is not permission." "No, it wasn't." The warm mood around the table collapsed into small movements. Curtis packed the drill. Tammy gathered containers. Mr. Barlow wrapped his lamps. Diane held the photograph by its edges. "You want it back?" Owen asked. She looked at Beth's laughing face. For a moment, Owen thought she would take it. Instead, she returned it to the shelf. "No," she said. "But stop letting Lucille turn herself into the only person who remembers correctly." She walked down the trail without accepting pie. Lucille folded the dish towel into smaller and smaller squares. "You stole it?" Owen said. "I took a photograph Diane hated. Those are not different sentences." "No. You built this whole thing on bringing it back. I brought it where it belonged. That's what people say when they take something." Everyone had gone by 9. The repaired lamps disappeared down the trail, leaving the table in darkness except for the battery lantern. Lucille stood beside her packed grocery sack. "I can leave tonight," she said. Owen looked at the photograph, the old list, and the envelope marked groceries. He did not ask her to stay. He did not tell her to go. "You sleep on the cot," he said. "We talk in the morning." Lucille nodded. It was the cabin's oldest rule, and for the first time, Owen understood how hard it could be to keep. In the morning, the photograph remained on the shelf between them. Lucille made coffee. Owen did not drink it. He sat at the table with both hands around an empty mug while she moved through the room, feeding the stove and washing the percolator basket as if ordinary tasks could postpone the question. Finally, he said, "Tell it straight." She dried her hands. "I took the photograph from Diane's house." "When?" 25 years ago." "Before you left the cabin?" "After." "Why?" Lucille sat across from him. "Beth and Diane had a fight. Diane said everyone who came up here treated Walter like a public utility. Beth said Diane had never needed anybody badly enough to understand. They were both cruel and both partly right. Where was the picture? On Diane's mantle. She took it down after the fight and put it in a drawer. So you went through her drawer. I was looking for cigarettes. That improves things." "I didn't say it did." Lucille met his eyes. "I saw the photograph. Diane had written her name on the back because she paid to have the copies made. I took it because I thought she would destroy it. Did she say she would? No. Then you decided what she might do and punished her for it. Yes." The answer stopped him. He had prepared for excuses, not agreement. "Why bring it here now?" "Because Walter died. Because I had nowhere else to go. Because I'd carried it through 6 apartments and 2 marriages and never once admitted that keeping it was different from saving it. You told me it was your copy. I let you believe that. You told me my mother made this place work. She did. You told me she paid back the money. She did. How am I supposed to know which parts you shaped? You aren't." Lucille's voice roughened. "That's the cost of lying about one part. It stains the rest." Owen looked at Beth's face. What did you want from me? One night? Just that? At first. Lucille folded her hands on the table. Then I wanted you to see your mother before everybody corrected her. I wanted the picture on the wall long enough that Diane couldn't reduce Beth to what she stole. So you did the same thing in reverse. Lucille's hands tightened. Yes. The stove popped. Outside, wind moved through the bare branches, pushing a dry scatter of leaves across the porch. Did Walter know you took it? I don't know. He never mentioned it. Did you talk to him after you left? Once a year for a while, then less. He called when Beth died. Owen looked up. What did he say? That she was gone? That's all? He cried so hard I could barely understand him. I told him I was sorry, he said. We kept making a room, and she kept running out of it. Then he hung up. Owen stared at the uneven grain of the table. Lucille rose and reached for her grocery sack. I'm not throwing you out, he said. I didn't assume you were. You packed. I own one bag. You own a car full of things. That's harder to carry dramatically. He almost smiled, which annoyed him. You need to apologize to Diane. Lucille's face closed. I admitted it. To me, she knows I took it. She heard you defend it. I'm not begging her. I didn't say beg. You don't know what she was like. Neither do you, apparently. You left. Lucille flinched. Owen regretted the word, but did not take it back. If this room has rules, he said, they cannot only apply to people you find sympathetic. You sound like Walter. I'm starting to understand why that wasn't always praise. Lucille put the grocery sack down. All right, she said. I'll apologize. To her face. I know where faces are. And we ask if the picture stays. She nodded. Diane was in the workshop with Curtis when they arrived. The old brass sconces lay on a bench beside carburetor parts and boxes of Walter's tools. Mason had begun labeling shelves with blue painter's tape. Keep, sell, unsure. Diane saw the photograph in Owen's hand and set down the rag she was using. You're returning it, she said. I'm asking, Owen replied. Lucille stepped forward. I took it. I told myself I was protecting something Beth cared about. Truth is, I was angry at you, and I wanted one thing you couldn't put away. Diane's expression remained flat. I'm sorry, Lucille said. Curtis became fascinated by a socket wrench. Diane looked at the back of the photograph. You could have asked for a copy. You said you never wanted to see us again. I said I never wanted to see Beth again. There's a difference. Not much of one. There was to me. Lucille nodded. That doesn't make taking it right. No. The apology waited between them, unanswered. Owen held out the photograph. Diane did not take it. You really mailed copies? He asked. I addressed them. Beth would forget stamps or put two envelopes inside each other. Diane touched one corner. She wanted everybody in the picture to have proof they had finished the table. Why did you write your name on this one? Because Beth gave away 3 of my photographs before that. Were you involved with the cabin? Diane gave a short laugh without humor. Who do you think bought groceries when Dad had no cash? Who washed sheets when Beth disappeared for a week? I kept records. I called the propane company. Nobody took photographs of that. You could have stood in this one. I did. Owen examined the 9 adults. Diane was not among them. I set the camera on Dad's truck and used the timer. You can see my arm behind Lucille. Near the edge, a pale blur extended from behind Lucille's shoulder. Owen had assumed it belonged to the man beside her. I ran late, Diane said. Story of my life with Beth. You helped? Owen said. I did more than help. At first, Lucille looked at her. You hated us. Later. Why? Diane turned toward the workshop window. Outside, Walter's green truck sat where Owen had returned it. Because the room made Dad feel good, she said. Useful, forgiving. Every new person got his patience. Beth got chance after chance. I got phone calls asking me to fix whatever collapsed after their gratitude wore off. Some of us didn't collapse, Lucille said. And some did. I stopped knowing the difference before Dad did. Owen set the photograph on the workbench. Keep it, he told Diane. She looked at Beth for a long moment, then pushed the picture back toward him. No, put it where people can see it. Just tell the whole story when you do. Lucille's chin trembled once. She pressed her lips together. Diane picked up the rag again. That isn't forgiveness, she said. I know, Lucille replied. They walked back uphill without speaking. At the cabin, Owen returned the photograph to the shelf, but he did not put the cracker tin away. Protection did not require hiding. Below it, he hung both name boards. The new board acquired rules. Owen wrote them on the back, where they could be changed without turning the room into a courthouse. Thursday supper began at 6 and ended at 9. Repairs had to fit on the table. Nobody promised work they could not finish. Cash went into the grocery envelope, unless a job had been agreed as paid. Staying overnight required a direct conversation, not a story passed through somebody else. Lucille read the final rule twice. You expecting someone? I'm preventing expectations. That's not the same thing. It is, if it works. The following Thursday, Mr. Barlow returned with an electric kettle and no pie. Tammy brought meatloaf. Curtis brought 4 more folding chairs and a radio that had not played since Walter owned it. 2 diner customers climbed the trail, carrying a sewing machine and a box fan. Nobody arrived empty-handed. One woman brought 3 jars of green beans. Another sharpened kitchen knives on a stone he carried in his coat pocket. Owen repaired the fan, but refused the kettle, after melted plastic fell from its base. Lucille worked at the sewing machine until the frozen handwheel turned freely, then admitted she did not know how to thread it. You brought a machine you can't use? Owen asked the owner. I brought one I want to use. Lucille wrote her name beneath next week, threading lesson. The room grew loud, not cheerful every second, but occupied. People disagreed over screws, seasoning, and which radio stations still deserved to exist. Owen moved between repairs, setting limits when someone tried to add a bathroom outlet to the list, or asked whether he could just look at a service panel after dark. At 8:55, he announced closing. Everyone complained and began cleaning. By 9:10, the table was bare, plates washed, floor swept, and wood stacked higher than before supper. The grocery envelope contained $63 and a note from Mr. Barlow that read, "For non-burned extension cords." After the last visitor left, Lucille stood beside the old board. Beth would have liked that, she said. Diane might have once. Lucille glanced toward him. You're determined to make this difficult. It came that way. Work at Bexley moved from demolition into rough-in. Hal gave Owen 4 full weeks instead of 2. Renee began signing his supervised hours and testing him with code questions while they worked. How many conductors in that box? She asked from the ladder. Count them yourself. Wrong answer. He counted. At night, he studied beside the stove, while Lucille read grocery advertisements and circled apartments. Most required deposits larger than she could manage. One listed light housekeeping as part of the rent, which Lucille translated as free labor for somebody who owned 3 bathrooms. On a Tuesday evening, she placed the newspaper in front of Owen, found one. The advertisement was for a small apartment behind a retired nurse's house. 1 bedroom, utilities included, no deposit with references. You called? Tammy knows her. I'm seeing it Friday. Owen read the listing twice. That's good. Yes. You could afford it? Yes. That's good, he said again. Lucille folded the newspaper. He returned to his codebook, but the numbers had lost their meaning. Friday afternoon, she arrived at the diner carrying a brass key on a plain metal ring. The apartment? Owen asked. I moved Sunday. He looked at the key. It was exactly what they had been trying to find. Congratulations, he said. Lucille searched his face. You don't sound pleased. I am. You sound abandoned. The word irritated him because it landed accurately. I gave you a room until you found a place, and I found one. I know how agreements work. Do you? Owen closed his codebook. Lucille sat across from him in the empty booth. You've built every day around somebody needing you. Walter, me, everybody carrying a broken lamp up that hill. They pay or trade. I'm not talking about money. What are you talking about? I'm talking about what happens when the room no longer needs you to sleep on its floor. He looked away. Lucille placed the key between them. You inherited a cabin, she said. You did not inherit a sentence. Owen stared at the key. Being needed isn't a bad thing. No, you're making it sound like a disease. I'm making it sound like something that can hide one. What disease? Fear. Tammy came from the kitchen carrying a crate of clean glasses. She saw their faces, turned around, and carried the crate back through the swinging door. Owen lowered his voice. I have work. You have work when Hal calls. You have jobs from the diner. You're studying. Those are good things. And the cabin? also good. But, but you're sleeping on the floor of a one-room cabin because you gave me your bed. You spend every Thursday fixing other people's things. You haven't taken your licensing exam, rented a place, or bought a vehicle. I just started getting paid, I know. There will always be a reason to delay whatever scares you. What exactly do you think scares me? Lucille looked at him with the impatience of someone being asked to identify rain while standing in it. A room nobody needs you to save. He pushed the key back toward her. You found an apartment. Why are we talking about me? Because I'm leaving and you look like I broke a promise. I knew you would leave. Knowing is cheap. You don't get to stay at my cabin for 3 weeks and diagnose my life. No. I gotta watch it. Owen stood. I have to work. It's 6 in the evening. I have a porch outlet to replace. Paid? Yes. Good. Does that meet with your approval? No. But it will meet your cell phone bill. He left before she could say more. The porch outlet belonged to an accountant who had already bought the wrong replacement. Owen drove there in Hal's work van because Hal had allowed him to use it for evening jobs if he paid for fuel and did not leave wire clippings in the cup holders. The outlet took 40 minutes. Owen made $60. On the way back, he passed 3 apartment buildings and found a reason not to look at each one. One was too far from the diner. One had no parking he needed. One looked expensive through the dark. When he returned to the cabin, Lucille had gone to bed. The contribution board stood on the table. Under her name, she had written, "Leaving Sunday, room ready." Owen added beneath his own, "Not a sentence." The next morning, Lucille read it and said nothing. They moved her on Sunday using Hal's van and the Buick. Tammy arrived with the television. Curtis brought 2 men's backs worth of enthusiasm and 1 man's back. "I'm supervising," he said when Owen handed him a storage tub. "You inherited that from Diane," Lucille replied. Her apartment occupied the rear half of a converted garage behind a white clapboard house. It had a narrow kitchen, a bedroom barely wider than the bed, and a living room with one window facing a row of bird feeders. The retired nurse who owned it was named Frances. She greeted them, showed Lucille where the water shutoff was, and informed Owen that if he drilled into any wall without asking, she would drill into him. "I like her," Lucille said after Frances left. "You like threats. I understand them." The entire move took an hour. Lucille's belongings looked larger once removed from the Buick. She owned quilts, frame prints, 2 cast-iron skillets, books, a sewing basket, and 6 ceramic birds wrapped individually in dish towels. "You had birds in your car?" Owen asked. "Where would you put them?" "Not in a car driven by you." She positioned the birds across the kitchen windowsill. Tammy plugged in the television. Curtis discovered the bedroom door would not latch and repaired it with a folded piece of cardboard behind the strike plate. "Professional," Owen said. "It closes. So does a coffin, usually only once." Lucille unpacked the grocery sack last. She placed the prescription bottle in a cabinet and the toothbrush in a glass beside the sink. Then she folded the sack into a square and tucked it beneath the kitchen counter. Owen fixed a loose wire in the lamp by her chair. When it came on, the apartment became unmistakably occupied. Lucille handed him $10. "No, this is not the cabin. It took 5 minutes. Then you made $120 an hour. Don't become unpleasant about success." He took the money. At the door, Lucille hugged Tammy and allowed Curtis to hug her, after pretending not to understand what he was doing. When Owen's turn came, they stood facing each other. "You'll come Thursday?" he asked. "Not every Thursday. I didn't say every. You meant every. Fine. This Thursday." "Yes." He nodded. Lucille pulled him against her without warning. She smelled like coffee, starch, and the hand lotion she used after washing dishes. "Take the cot," she said into his shoulder. He drove back alone. The cabin seemed larger without her storage tubs and smaller without her movement. Owen carried the cot outside, shook dust from the canvas, and set it near the stove rather than against the wall. He cooked an egg badly, ate it at the oversized table, and opened his codebook. At 9, he realized he had been reading the same paragraph for 20 minutes. He crossed the room and examined the rules on the back of the contribution board. Weekly supper was not a promise he had made. He could cancel it. Nobody would suffer. Mr. Barlow's lamps worked. Tammy had bought a new toaster. The woman with the sewing machine had found someone at church to teach her threading. The room did not require constant rescue. On the front of the board, Owen erased Thursday supper and rewrote it, first and third Thursdays, Beneath it, paid work by appointment. 2 trade repairs per supper. He stepped back. The rules looked unfriendly. They also looked possible. At Bexley, the rough inn passed inspection with only 2 corrections. Hal celebrated by buying gas station hot dogs and declaring them deductible. Renee signed another block of Owen's supervised hours. "You're close," she said. "To what?" "Enough hours to apply. Hal says you took the prep class before, 2 years ago. Electricity has remained largely spiteful. Most of it will come back." Owen took an exam application from the Union Hall the following afternoon. He filled it out at Harper's Grill because the cabin table was covered with a disassembled mixer, and Tammy had threatened to deny him pie until he completed the first page. The fee made him pause. Lucille, sitting across from him on her day off, tapped the line with one fingernail. "You have it." "I know." "Then why are you staring?" "I enjoy the number. Pay it. It wipes out most of what I saved this week, and buys the chance to earn more next year." That sounds like one of those sayings printed over a sunrise. Pay it before I become inspirational. He did. The next supper felt different under the new limits. Owen finished 2 paid jobs before the meal and refused a third. One trade repair was a floor lamp. The other was a crock pot with a burned connector that he declared dead. "Can nothing be saved?" its owner asked. "Your kitchen. By throwing this away." People complained about the twice-monthly schedule. Owen did not change it. Lucille arrived late with cornbread and left before cleanup because she had to work the breakfast shift. Watching her descend the trail was easier than watching her move out. Not easy, but no longer a wound reopening. Mason arrived after everyone else had gone. He wore a quilted vest Owen had never seen and shoes too clean for the trail. He walked around the table, inspected the repaired roof, and looked through the cabin window at the neat shelves. "You've done a lot," he said. "So have you. Nice vest. It was on sale." Then I retract my admiration. Mason did not take the bait. He moved to the porch rail and looked toward the farmhouse lights. "Mom's renovation is running over. You want the chicken bowl back? We got it. Then I'm out of guesses. I'm trying to solve 2 problems." Owen waited. "The garage apartment is empty," Mason said. "You could move down there. Has a bathroom, heat, power. We'd finish it properly. In exchange for?" "Not exchange. We'd all benefit." That word means exchange. Mason exhaled. "Let us use the cabin. For what? Short rentals, weekend couples, maybe hunting season. People like this kind of thing when it has a story. It has no plumbing. We'd add it. The trail's bad. We'd gravel it. It's 1 room." Mason gestured at the cabin as if Owen had proved his point. "Exactly. Rustic. And where do Thursday suppers go? We could keep some dates open. You mean I could reserve my own cabin?" "Owen, you don't have to act insulted. You'd get a better place to live, Mom gets income to help with the farmhouse, and you keep some use. What do you get?" "I manage it." "There it is." Mason's voice sharpened. "Why does everything have to be a fight with you? Because you come up here with plans for what I own. I'm trying to include you. You included me when there was mud to carry things through. Now the roof doesn't leak and people are showing up, so the lines on paper are stupid again. This place can make money. It already does. $60 porch outlets are not a future. They're a start. You could still do electrical work. From the garage you generously let me occupy. You'd have heat. I have heat. You have a wood stove and a cot. I have a cabin." Mason stepped closer. "You're confusing being needed with being successful." The words struck with Lucille's voice hidden inside them. Owen looked away first. Mason mistook the silence for advantage. "Think about it," he said. "Grandpa gave you something impractical. I'm offering a way to make it useful." Owen looked at the table, the names on the wall, and Beth laughing beside a door whose paint he had not yet restored. "No," he said. "That's pride. No. Pride is expecting me to thank you for taking over." Mason's face hardened. "Fine. Keep playing caretaker." He turned toward the trail. Owen called after him. "Mason." Mason looked back. "I am going to move out." For an instant, satisfaction appeared. "Not to your garage," Owen said. "And the cabin stays mine." After Mason left, Owen sat at the table until the stove needed wood. The accusation still hurt because some of it was true. That did not make Mason's solution right. The following day, Owen called the number on a handwritten apartment notice pinned beside the diner kitchen. The room was modest, above a retired barber's detached garage, with a hot plate and a shower that produced warm water if nobody ran the washing machine. Owen could afford it. He told the barber he wanted to move in at the beginning of the month. That left 12 days. He returned to the cabin that evening, carrying a small can of blue paint matched to the color beneath the privy door's gray layers. He set it beside the original photograph. Then he took the cot. For the first time since Walter died, Owen made the bed for himself. The cot was less comfortable than Owen remembered. The canvas dipped in the middle, turning every sleeping position into a gradual decision to fold. He woke before dawn, with one foot outside the blanket and Walter's old hatchet pressing against his shoulder beneath the cot. Lucille had somehow made it look civilized. Owen rolled out, fed the stove, and opened the door. The world smelled metallic. Clouds hung low over the ridge, and a skin of ice covered the water bucket on the porch. When Owen broke it with one knuckle, the crack sounded louder than it should have. At the diner, every television showed the same weather map. A band of pink stretched across 3 counties, while a cheerful meteorologist advised people not to travel after dark. Pink is a dishonest color for danger, Tammy said. Lucille filled Owen's travel mug. You have enough wood? 2 stacks? Food? Beans? Rice? Eggs? Battery? Lanterns charged? Water? There's a pump. Pump freezes. I know how to wrap it. Lucille kept looking at him. I'm not moving into your apartment for the weather, he said. I didn't ask you to. You arranged your face. My face is private. Hal released the crew early. Freezing rain had begun as a faint hiss against the Bexley windows, barely visible until it coated the scaffolding outside. Go, he told them. I don't pay enough to have you sleeping in this building. You don't pay enough for most things, Dale said. Hal pointed at the door, especially conversation. Before Owen left, Renee handed him a folder containing his signed hours. Make a copy, she said. Keep the original dry. I know, you kept your lunch on a windowsill during rain. That was different. It was soup. Hal let Owen take the van to the diner, but not beyond it. Tammy drove him from there to the county road in her 4-wheel drive wagon. Lucille came along, despite being off shift, holding 2 grocery bags between her feet. I have food, Owen said. You have ingredients. These are meals. At the bottom of the trail, the freezing rain had thickened. It ticked against the wagon roof and turned the tree branches glossy. You both go home, Owen said. Tammy looked uphill. You sure? I'm walking 300 yards. Uphill. That's how hills work. Lucille handed him the grocery bags. Call before your phone dies. You call before you start walking up here to inspect me. I moved out so I wouldn't have to inspect you. You moved 3 miles away. Tammy waited until Owen reached the first bend before driving off. The cabin was cold but dry. He lit the stove, wrapped the pump head with canvas and an old blanket, then filled every pot and jar he owned. He brought another armload of wood beneath the porch and covered the outside stack. By dark, ice coated the blue paint can, the porch rail, and the black branches above the roof. The farmhouse lights glowed through the trees until 6:17. Then everything below went dark. Owen's battery lantern illuminated the room in a soft white circle. The stove required nothing from the power lines. Heat pressed steadily against the walls while ice whispered over the roof. He called Diane. No answer. He tried Curtis. Yeah, Curtis said after the 3rd ring. You all right? Power's out. I noticed. Mom says it'll be back soon. Temperature's dropping. We have blankets. What about the pipes? We opened cabinets. That does not create heat. Mason's working on the generator. Owen pictured Mason reading instructions by flashlight while Diane offered helpful questions. Generator was running last year? Grandpa ran it. Grandpa was alive last year. Good observation. Fuel fresh? A pause. I'm going to check. The connection failed. Owen placed the photograph inside its waterproof cover and left it above the table. He did not know why he checked it. The roof was sound now. The window closed. Nothing dripped. At 8, a limb struck the cabin hard enough to shake ash from the stovepipe. Owen grabbed the lantern and went outside. The limb had fallen across the trail, not the roof. It was thick as his thigh, sheathed in ice, and connected to a larger branch tangled overhead. He did not touch it. Weight shifted through the trees with creaks and sharp reports. Every branch had become a loaded spring. His phone rang as he stepped inside. Curtis's voice came broken by static. Generator won't hold. Fuel, lines cracked. Can you replace it? Not tonight. Hardware stores closed and the spare line in the shop is the wrong size. Come up, we're fine. Curtis. A sound like breaking glass came through the phone. What was that? Window over the kitchen sink. Come up now. Mom says, I don't care what Mom says. Bring blankets. Shut off the water before you leave. The call ended. Owen put more wood into the stove. He cleared tools from the table and moved the codebook, application copies, and work folder into the cracker tin beneath the counter. He set out all 3 plates, then stared at them. 3 plates. There would be 4 people if Diane, Mason, and Curtis came. He laughed once because of course the first shortage in a crisis would be something Diane could have predicted from his kitchen box. He heard Curtis before he saw him. Branches down, Curtis shouted from below. Owen took the lantern to the trail. 3 flashlight beams moved through the trees. Mason arrived first, carrying 2 duffel bags and wearing Walter's brown work coat over sweatpants. Curtis followed with a cooler. Diane came last, one hand gripping Curtis's shoulder whenever the ground rose. Her new boots had no traction. Owen reached for her arm. I can walk, she said. I can see that. She slipped before finishing the sentence. Owen caught her beneath the elbow. She did not thank him, but she kept hold of his sleeve until they reached the porch. Mason stopped at the door. We're not staying long, then freeze efficiently. Inside, heat struck their faces. Diane looked around as if entering a place she had expected to be gone. The table occupied the center. The photograph hung above it. Both contribution boards were mounted nearby, names facing outward. Curtis set down the cooler. It's warmer here than the house. Stove, Owen said. I understand stoves. Generator says otherwise. The fuel line was old. So is the stove. Mason removed Walter's coat and hung it on the nail beside the door. Power company says maybe noon tomorrow. Maybe means they don't know. The house will hold heat. Kitchen windows broken. We covered it. With what? Cardboard. Owen looked at Diane. Did you shut off the water? Curtis did. Drain the upstairs lines? Silence. You have upstairs plumbing, Owen said. If the house freezes, it is not going to freeze solid in one night, Mason said. Then go back. Nobody moved. Lucille's old storage space accepted the duffel bags. Diane took the cot after protesting for exactly as long as politeness required. Curtis sat in the short-legged chair. Mason leaned against the counter. Owen served beans and cornbread, using a bowl, 3 plates, and the lid of a saucepan. Diane received the saucepan lid. You gave me the least stable one, she said. You're the only person here with clean pants. Mason laughed into his plate. Diane gave him a look, then balanced the food on her knees. For a while, they ate without talking. The stove hummed. Ice moved against the roof. The room was too small to maintain separate resentments comfortably. Diane looked at the new contribution board. What is half a privy? She asked. Long story, Curtis said. Shared labor, Owen replied. You listed stubborn under yourself. Lucille did. Diane took another bite. That sounds like her. Near 10, a branch broke somewhere toward the farmhouse. Mason went to the window, but darkness hid everything beyond the reflection of the room. We should check the house, he said. No, Owen answered. Not under loaded trees. My things are down there. So are mine, Diane said. They'll be there in daylight. You don't know that. Owen set down his plate. This is what we have. Heat, water, food. Stop risking your neck for furniture. Mason turned. Easy for you? Your property fits in one room. Tonight, so does yours. The words landed harder than Owen intended. Mason stared at him. Diane looked at the photograph. Beth would have enjoyed this, she said. Us freezing? Curtis asked. Us trapped together. Same answer, Mason muttered. Diane stood and walked to the photograph. She removed it from the wall, carrying it toward the lantern. I was behind the truck when the timer went off, she said. I had to run around the table. Lucille shifted to make room, but I didn't get there. You said your arm was in it, Owen replied. It is, just the arm. Why didn't they take another? Beth said it was perfect. Of course she did. Diane smiled before she could stop herself. Outside, ice cracked from the edge of the roof and shattered on the ground. The week after this, Diane said, Beth disappeared with the grocery money. Owen looked up. The $640? No. Different time. $37 and some change. Diane traced the photograph's edge. She came back that evening with groceries, lamp oil, 2 blankets, and a man named Eddie who had lost his room at the boarding house. That's where the money went? She never asked. Dad yelled. I yelled. Eddie stood on the porch holding toilet paper because Beth had made him carry something useful. Curtis smiled at his plate. Did he stay? Owen asked. 6 nights. Repaired the chimney. Owen looked toward the stovepipe. Same repair? No. Dad redid it later and complained about Eddie's mortar for the rest of his life. Diane returned the photograph to its hook. Beth could steal and come back with more than she took, she said. That was the problem. She made consequences feel small until they belonged to somebody else. Owen heard no hatred in her voice now, only exhaustion that had survived its target. Mason shifted against the counter. Why didn't you tell us any of this? I told you she was trouble. That's not the same story. It was the part I could repeat without missing her. The room went still. Diane sat on the cot and pressed both palms between her knees. I hated that picture because she looked like the person I loved, she said. Then Lucille took it, and I got to hate her instead. Owen wanted to say something that would release them. Nothing honest came. At midnight, the ice changed to sleet. Curtis slept in the chair with his chin against his chest. Mason took the floor near the wall. Diane lay beneath 2 blankets on the cot. Owen remained awake beside the stove. Near 2, Mason opened his eyes. You're not sleeping, he whispered. Somebody has to feed it. I can. You'll stack the wood wrong. I know how to build a fire. That's not what Lucille says. Mason sat up and added 2 pieces of wood crosswise, leaving air between them. The flame rose. She taught me at supper last week, he said. You came to supper? I stayed below the porch. Didn't feel like walking into another argument. You listened from the dark? That sounds worse than it was. It sounds accurate. Mason watched the fire. I shouldn't have called this place impractical, he said. It is impractical. Not tonight. Owen looked at him. Mason rubbed his hands together. The garage offer stands. No, I figured. And the cabin isn't part of the farmhouse plan. Mason's mouth tightened. We could all benefit. Tonight doesn't make it yours. I didn't say it did. You will tomorrow. You'll tell people Grandpa meant this for the whole family. Diane's voice came from the cot. He didn't. They both turned. She was awake, eyes open in the lantern light. Dad left it to Owen, she said. I thought it was because Owen needed somewhere to land. That's what you told everyone, Owen said. Yes. And now? Diane looked around the one-room cabin, at the dry roof, the wood stacked by the stove, the table large enough for all of them. Now, I think Dad knew which one of us would leave the room ready. Nobody answered Diane. The fire settled around the new wood with a soft rush. Mason looked at Owen, then down at his hands. Whatever apology might have followed would have had to cross too many years at once. Owen stood and opened the stove. Get some sleep, he told Mason. I'll take the next hour. You've taken all of them, then you can take morning. Mason lay down again without arguing. At dawn, the ridge looked made of glass. Every twig carried a clear shell. The blackberry vines bowed to the ground. A pine had fallen across the trail below the cabin, its top tangled in the hardwoods, and another had crushed part of the farmhouse fence. The ice had stopped falling, but the clouds remained heavy. Curtis stood on the porch beside Owen. We can cut the small limb. Not the one hanging above it, I see it. You were looking at the trunk. I can see 2 things. Behind them, Mason said, Good, 1 for each of you. Diane handed out coffee in Owen's 3 mugs and the saucepan he had used as a plate. She drank from the percolator lid. No, Owen said. It holds coffee. It also pours coffee. I'm adapting. They waited until full daylight before leaving the porch. Owen and Curtis cleared the smaller branches with the bow saw. Mason dragged them aside, stacking the usable wood near the cabin without being asked. The larger pine had fallen low enough to block the trail, but remained supported at one end. Owen refused to cut it under tension. We go around, he said. That adds half a mile, Mason replied. Better than subtracting a cousin. They followed an old deer path through the woods. Diane held Owen's sleeve on the steep sections, this time without pretending she did not need to. The farmhouse had survived. The kitchen window was broken, an icy wind had pushed cardboard onto the counter. Water had frozen in the sink. A branch had dented the gutter and torn one of the new black sconces from the wall. Diane stood in the kitchen looking at it. I never liked those lights, she said. You chose them, Owen replied. I was influenced. By what? A discount. Curtis opened the cabinet beneath the sink. The pipes had not burst. He had drained most of the water before leaving, though not enough to prevent ice from forming in the trap. "The house is at 39, Mason called from the thermostat. Owen checked the service panel and the damaged exterior wiring before anyone tried the generator again. The pulled sconce had exposed a conductor, but the breaker had tripped. "Leave it off," he said. "When the power returns, don't touch anything until I check." Diane watched him replace the panel cover. Walter would have started the generator anyway, she said. "Grandpa once used a nail where a fuse belonged. He said it was temporary." He said temporary for 11 years. They covered the window with plywood from the workshop and heavy plastic. Curtis found fuel hose on an old mower and cut a safe replacement section for the generator. Mason cleaned the carburetor while Owen repaired the connection. None of them worked alone, and none trusted the others enough to stop checking. The generator started shortly before noon. It could not run the entire house, but it powered 2 heaters, the refrigerator, and the furnace controls. Diane stood over a vent until warm air reached her hands. "You could stay at the cabin another night," Owen said. "I have a house. Yesterday I had a cabin. That was different. Explain." She looked around the cold kitchen. "No." The power company truck reached their road that afternoon. Service returned just before dark, though the crew warned that damaged lines could fail again. Lucille and Tammy arrived in Tammy's wagon, carrying thermoses, sandwiches, and enough blankets to shelter people who had not asked. Lucille found Owen on the farmhouse porch repairing the torn sconce box. "You stayed up all night," she said. "Mason took an hour. Did the family survive?" Diane opened the door behind him, against Lucille's expectations. "I brought chicken soup. That improves them." Lucille looked from Diane to Owen. "What happened up there?" "Cabin worked," Owen said. "That's what it does." Mason carried a broken limb toward the brush pile. His clean shoes had been replaced by Walter's work boots. He stopped near the porch. "I'm going to gravel the trail when the ground dries." Owen set down his screwdriver. "Why?" "So an ambulance could get up there." There was no ambulance. There could be. Or rental customers. Mason took the suspicion without flinching. "No rental customers." "Your idea?" "Withdrawn." "Because the cabin has potential?" "Because it belongs to you." The answer did not erase the offer or the insult, but it left nowhere for Owen to push. "Gravel up to the boundary," Owen said. "Past that, we decide together." Mason nodded. "Fair." Diane stood in the doorway holding a stack of blankets. "I'll pay half," she said. "I didn't ask." "I know." The farmhouse repairs took 3 days. Owen worked at Bexley until 4, then came down to replace the damaged exterior box and check outlets near the broken window. Diane paid him the same rate Hal recommended. When Owen tried to refuse, she placed the check inside his code book. "This isn't dinner," she said. "It's work." He accepted it. On the second evening, they sat at Walter's kitchen table while the furnace ran. Mason and Curtis had gone for window glass. Diane watched Owen complete the receipt Hal had told him to keep for every paid job. "I was wrong about why Dad left you the cabin," she said. Owen kept writing. "You told me." "No. I said something kind during a storm. Those are not always the same as apologies." He put down the pen. Diane folded a dish towel on the table, then unfolded it. "When you stayed with Dad, I told people you were drifting. I said you didn't have better options. You said it to me." "Yes, more than once." "I know. Why?" She smoothed the towel's edge. "Because you saw how much care he needed, and I kept telling myself he was managing. Every appointment you drove him to was proof that I had chosen not to notice something. It was easier to make your devotion look like failure than admit it shamed me." Owen looked toward Walter's empty place at the end of the table. "You could have helped." "Yes." "You could have given me a weekend." "Yes." "You don't get credit for saying it now. I know that too." He wanted a defense he could reject. Diane gave him none. "Why did you give me 48 hours?" he asked. "Because if you stayed, I would have had to live beside what you had done for Dad. I wanted the house to become mine quickly. That was cruel." "Yes." The furnace clicked off. Pipes ticked inside the walls. Diane folded the towel again. "I'm sorry," she said. Owen did not forgive her in that moment. Forgiveness would have been too much like making her confession useful on demand. But the next evening, when she brought him a bowl of chicken and dumplings, he returned the previous bowl clean. 12 days after telling the barber he wanted the apartment, Owen moved down from the cabin. Everything he owned fit in Hal's van. The cot went to the apartment above the garage. The mismatched plates stayed at the cabin. So did the percolator, the lantern, the old name board, and the photograph. Lucille helped him arrange the room. She complained that the bed faced the wrong direction, and that the hot plate was too close to the dish towel. When they finished, Owen locked the door, put the key in his pocket, and waited. Lucille raised an eyebrow. What? Nobody needs anything. Awful, isn't it? He looked around his modest room. It was clean, heated, and silent. The silence felt unfamiliar, not empty. I might get used to it. Don't rush. The electrical exam came 6 weeks later. Owen passed on the first attempt, though not by enough to become unbearable about it. Hal posted the score in the work trailer until Owen removed it. Renee gave him a new codebook without Hal's rude comments, then spent lunch copying the best comments into the margins. Paid work became steadier. Owen bought a used truck from a retired painter. The passenger door opened only from the outside, and Lucille declared this proof that success should remain humble. Thursday suppers continued twice a month. Owen kept the limits. People who needed large jobs received estimates or referrals. People who brought repairable objects worked beside him when they could. The grocery envelope paid for food, lamp oil, hardware, and improvements to the cabin. Nobody became wealthy. Nobody was allowed to pretend banana bread covered a day's rewiring. The room occasionally held someone overnight. A home health aide whose rental had flooded stayed 4 nights and replaced the torn window screens before leaving. A mechanic between apartments slept there for a week, repaired the pump, and found work through Luis Alvarez's garage. Owen asked direct questions, set dates, and did not build his entire life around keeping either person. Lucille visited, but she never stayed again. Her one return night remained exactly one. Mason graveled the trail in spring. He and Owen argued over drainage until Curtis left both of them with shovels and went home. Diane supplied stone without calling it a gift. Tammy organized suppers when Owen worked late. Mr. Barlow began arriving early to set out plates and continued bringing more pie than any agreement required. The old blue door came off the privy. Owen built a plain replacement, then carried the original to the cabin porch. Beneath the gray layers, the blue survived in stubborn patches. Lucille stripped the upper panels. Diane sanded the edges. Neither mentioned that they were working together until Tammy took a picture and threatened to display it at the diner. Owen matched the color and repainted the door. Using the old photograph as a guide, he lettered 5 white words across it. The letters were not as graceful as Beth's. Lucille stood back. Your V leans. It has character. Your V needs support. Diane handed him the brush. Beth's leaned too. Leave it. They rehung the door where it had originally belonged. A year after Lucille knocked, the cabin still had one room. The roof no longer leaked. The pump worked. The shelves held tools, dishes, and a cracker tin for papers that needed to remain dry. The oversized table had been resurfaced with narrow boards contributed by people who used it, so the top showed several kinds of wood joined without pretending to match. On the anniversary Thursday, Lucille brought the old photograph outside. We're doing another, she announced. Who decided? Owen asked, the person holding the evidence. Tammy arranged everyone behind the table. Mr. Barlow insisted on the end because his knees objected to climbing over benches. Curtis stood beside Diane. Mason arrived late carrying the last bowl of beans and was punished by being placed in the back. Hal and Renee came directly from work in dusty clothes. Luis Alvarez, older than Owen expected and still refusing retirement, stood with one hand on the table he had helped sand. Lucille positioned them using the old photograph. Then she stopped. Beth's place was open beside the table's left end. Nobody suggested filling it. Diane set the camera on the hood of Owen's truck and activated the timer, just as she had the first time. She started toward the group. Faster, Mason called. I am not 29. You weren't fast then either, Lucille said. Diane reached them with 2 seconds left. Owen stood beside the empty space, not inside it. Walter's place at the opposite end remained empty too, though Curtis rested one hand near it. The camera flashed. For an instant, everyone held still around what was missing. Then Mr. Barlow complained about his knees, Tammy accused Mason of hiding the beans, and Lucille ordered Owen to check the picture before anybody moved. He crossed the grass and lifted the camera. The photograph showed a table built from mismatched boards, a blue door with a leaning V, and adults crowded together without becoming a perfect family. Diane was fully inside the frame this time. Lucille stood beside her. Mason's eyes were closed. Curtis was laughing at something Hal had said. The empty space beside Owen was visible, but it did not swallow the picture. Lucille came to look over his shoulder. "Well?" she asked. Owen studied the faces, then glanced back at the old photograph resting on the table. "We keep both," he said. He carried the camera inside and set it beneath Beth's laughing picture while the others brought in the food. Outside, the restored blue door remained open until the last person crossed the threshold.